The summer of 1939 was unusually warm. Across Europe the harvest was golden. In the English countryside the wheat stood tall and still. In the cafes of Paris the sunlight hit the pavement with a lazy, deceptive heat. And in the border towns of Poland, the storks were beginning to gather for their migration south. If you were alive in those final days of August, you felt a strange vibration in the air, a static charge. We called it the War of Nerves. For 6 years we had watched the newsreels, we had seen the marching boots in the Rhineland, we had seen Austria disappear, we had watched Czechoslovakia be carved up like a Sunday roast. But every time we told ourselves that it would not happen here. Not again. But on the morning of September 1st, the sky did not break with the sun. It broke with steel. This is not the story of generals or maps. This is the story of what it felt like to wake up in one world and go to sleep in another. This is the story of the last breath of the old world and the first scream of the new. It begins in the dark. It is 4:40 in the morning. Friday. In the small Polish town of Wielan, the bakeries are just firing their ovens. The town is sleeping. It is a market day. Farmers are already on the roads, their carts loaded with late summer apples and grain. There are no military bases here, no anti-aircraft guns, just a hospital, a church, and rows of wooden houses where families are dreaming in the last hour of peace they will ever know. High above them the air begins to tremble. It is a sound the world has never heard before, a drone that grows into a roar, and then a scream. The German Junkers Ju-87. The Stuka. Attached to the landing gear of these planes are wind-driven sirens. The pilots call them Jericho trumpets. They serve no mechanical purpose. They are there only for psychological terror. They are designed to make you freeze, to make your blood turn to ice before the bomb even hits. The first bomb does not hit a barracks. It hits the All Saints Hospital. The roof collapses in a cloud of red dust and ancient timber. Patients, trapped in their beds, are buried instantly. In seconds, the centre of Wielan is an inferno. The blast wave shatters windows 3 streets away. Survivors stumble out into the street in their nightclothes. They look up, choking on the dust of their own homes, and they see the black crosses on the wings against the greying sky. Zofia, an 11-year-old girl, wakes up to the ceiling falling on her bed. Her mother grabs her hand, pulling her through the wreckage. Zofia asks if it is a drill or perhaps a storm. Her mother screams at her to put her shoes on and run. By 6 a.m, 70% of Wielan is gone. This is the first lesson of September 1939. There are no front lines anymore. The war is not out there, in the trenches. The war is in your bedroom. The war is in the hospital ward. The war is falling from the sky. While Wielan burns, the border dissolves. Across the entire length of the Polish frontier, the Wehrmacht pours in. 1.5 million men, 2,000 tanks. It is a flood of grey uniforms. For the Polish soldiers manning the border outposts, the sheer scale of the metal wave is paralysing. They are fighting with bravery that will become legendary, charging tanks with cavalry, firing antique rifles at armoured cars, but bravery cannot stop physics. A Polish officer, writing in his diary that morning, scribbles a single line noting that the geometry of the battlefield has broken. They are everywhere at once. They call it Blitzkrieg, lightning war. It is a word the newspapers will fall in love with, but for the men on the ground, it doesn't feel like lightning. It feels like a machine grinder. It is a coordinated dance of tanks breaking the line, aircraft smashing the supply trains, and infantry mopping up the survivors. 1,000 miles to the west in London, the sun is shining. It is a Friday morning here too. People are going to work. The milkman is making his rounds, but the headline on the Daily Express hits the streets like a physical blow. Germany invades Poland. There is no cheering. No patriotic fever like in 1914. There are no crowds throwing flowers at soldiers. Instead, there is a heavy, sick silence. In the House of Commons, the politicians are arguing, but in the streets the people know. They look at the sky, not for rain, but for the Heinkels and Dorniers they know are coming. The British government initiates Operation Pied Piper. It is the greatest social upheaval in the nation's history. The order is simple: get the children out. Imagine the scene at Waterloo Station. Thousands of children. They are lined up in rows like little soldiers. They wear luggage tags tied to their coats with string, bearing their names and their assigned destinations. But the most striking detail is the small cardboard box hanging from every child's shoulder. The gas mask. The government has issued 38 million of them. They smell of rubber and disinfectant. For a child, the mask is a terrifying object, a monster face with a plastic snout. Mothers kneel on the platform, fixing collars, smoothing hair. They are told not to cry. Morale must be maintained. So they wave goodbye with dry eyes, watching the trains steam out into the countryside, taking a generation away from the cities that are expected to burn. For those who stay behind, the city transforms. As evening falls on September 1st, the lights go out. The blackout orders are total. Street lamps are doused. Car headlights are covered with slotted masks, allowing only a sliver of light to escape. Windows are covered with heavy black wool or painted over. London, a city of millions, vanishes into the ink. Walking home becomes a hazard. People collide with lampposts, trip over curbs, walk into canals. The darkness is psychological as much as it is physical. It creates a sense of claustrophobia. You can hear the city breathing around you, the scuff of shoes on pavement, the distant rumble of a bus, but you can see nothing. It is in this darkness that the waiting begins. Saturday passes. September the 2nd. The heat wave continues. The news from Poland is fragmented, terrifying. The Polish Air Force has been caught on the ground. The panzers are deep inland. Britain and France have issued an ultimatum to Hitler: withdraw or face war. The deadline is set for Sunday morning 11 a.m. Sunday, September 3rd. The churches are full. People pray, but their ears are tuned to the radio. At 11:15 a.m, the Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, speaks. His voice is tired. It is the voice of a man who has seen his life's work, the preservation of peace, turn to ash in his hands. He tells the nation that no reply has been received from Berlin. Consequently, this country is at war with Germany. It is done. The tension snaps. But then, only minutes after the broadcast ends, a sound rises over London. The wail of the air raid siren. It is a false alarm, a glitch in the system, but the people do not know that. They run. For the first time, they run to the Anderson shelters dug into their back gardens. They run into the basements. They clutch their gas masks. They wait for the end of the world. They wait for the gas. They wait for the fire. They sit in the damp earth holding their breath, listening for the engines. But the sky remains empty. The all-clear sounds. People emerge, blinking in the sunlight, dusting the dirt from their clothes. They are embarrassed, relieved, and confused. This is the phony war, the anticlimax. But while London is quiet, the war has already claimed its first victims at sea. That very evening, the passenger liner SS Athenia is steaming across the Atlantic, bound for Montreal. It is full of civilians, women, children, refugees fleeing the coming storm. They believe they are safe. The rules of naval warfare, established for decades, state that passenger ships are off limits. They are eating dinner in the dining salon. The mood is tense but civilized. But beneath the waves, Oberleutnant Fritz Julius Lemp, commanding the U-30, sees a silhouette against the twilight. He does not check the identification. He fires. The torpedo strikes the Athenia on the port side. The explosion rips through the bulkheads. The lights die. The dining salon tilts. Tables slide, crockery smashes, and the ocean rushes in. 117 people die in the freezing water. The war is only hours old, and the rulebook has already been torn up. There will be no gentleman's war. There will be no safe passage. Back in Poland, the situation is catastrophic. The Polish army is not retreating, it is dissolving. The speed of the German advance is uncoupling the Polish command structure. Orders sent by telephone lines are never received because the lines have been cut by saboteurs or blown up by dive bombers. By September 8th, the German tanks are at the outskirts of Warsaw. The siege of Warsaw begins. Life inside the city becomes a nightmare of shrinking geography. First, the suburbs fall, then the outer districts. The perimeter tightens. The water mains are bombed, so there is no running water. People drink from the Vistula River or from puddles in bomb craters. The electricity fails. The radio station, Radio Warsaw, keeps broadcasting, playing Chopin's Polonaise in a major over and over again, a signal to the world that the heart of Poland is still beating. The mayor of Warsaw, Stefan Starczynski, refuses to leave. He stays on the air, his voice growing raspier each day as the smoke of the burning city fills the studio. He speaks directly to the citizens. He organises civilian defence battalions. Men and women dig anti-tank ditches in the parks where they used to walk their dogs on Sundays. They flip trams on their sides to build barricades. But the Luftwaffe has absolute control of the air. They begin terror bombing. This is not tactical support for the army. This is the deliberate destruction of a city to break the will of the population. Incendiary bombs drop like rain. These are small devices, filled with phosphorus and magnesium. They burn with a white-hot intensity that water cannot extinguish. Whole apartment blocks turn into chimneys. The asphalt on the streets melts, sticking to the boots of the firefighters who are trying to battle 1,000 blazes with no water pressure. The smell of Warsaw in September 1939 is the smell of burning sugar, burning brick, and burning flesh. Amidst this horror, we see the resilience of the human spirit stripped down to its rawest form. Hospitals are bombed, so surgeries are performed in cellars by candlelight. There is no anaesthesia. Nurses tear up bedsheets for bandages. When the food runs out, they eat the cavalry horses that have been killed by shrapnel. In the countryside, the roads are clogged with a river of humanity. Refugees. They are carrying their lives in pillowcases. They are walking east, away from the Germans. But on September 17th, the final blow lands. The Soviet Union invades from the east. The Polish people are caught in a vice, crushed between the hammer and the anvil. The soldiers who had been fighting the Germans turn to see the Red Army crossing the border behind them. The despair is total. There is nowhere left to run. The country is being erased from the map in real time. By the end of September, Warsaw falls. The silence that descends on the city is heavy and terrible. It is the silence of the grave. The smoke hangs low over the ruins. The survivors crawl out of the basements. Their faces black with soot, their eyes hollow. They watch the victory parade of the Wehrmacht. They watch Hitler tour the city. But for the rest of the world, specifically in the West, the shooting has stopped. The invasion of Poland is over. The phony war settles in for the winter. In France, the soldiers sit in the Maginot Line. This is a fortress of concrete and steel, built to stop the Germans. It has underground trains, cinemas, air conditioning. The French soldiers play cards. They write letters. They drink wine. They stare out at the empty forests of the Ardennes and wait. They believe the concrete will save them. They believe this war will be like the last one, static, slow, defensive. They are wrong. They do not know that the tactics used in Poland, the radio coordination, the concentrated armour, the dive bombers, were just a rehearsal. They do not know that the German General Staff is already looking at the maps of France. They do not know that the clock is ticking down to the spring of 1940. Winter comes early in 1939. It is one of the coldest winters on record. The canals of Europe freeze solid. Coal is rationed. In Berlin, rationing has already begun. The German people, though victorious in Poland, are not celebrating. They remember the hunger of 1918. They look at their ration cards, meat, butter, bread, all measured in grams, and they feel a deep, gnawing anxiety. In the occupied territories of Poland, the reign of terror begins immediately. This is not a normal occupation. The SS Death's Head units move in behind the army. Their list of targets has been prepared for months. Professors, priests, politicians, union leaders. Anyone who represents the Polish culture. They are taken to the forests and shot. The goal is decapitation of society, to turn a nation into a reservoir of slave labour. The nights in the winter of 1939 are long and dark. In the blackout, families sit around the wireless radio. It becomes the altar of the home. It is the only connection to the truth, or at least to the war. They listen to the propaganda, trying to read between the lines. In the Atlantic, the war is invisible but deadly. The U-boats are hunting. They are small, cramped iron tubes, smelling of diesel and sweat. The crews live in a perpetual state of dampness. They hunt on the surface at night, diving only when attacked. For the merchant sailors bringing food to Britain, every wave could hide a periscope. The water is freezing. To go into the water in the North Atlantic in winter is to die in minutes. As 1939 draws to a close, the world holds its breath. The storm has broken in the east, but the west is still waiting for the thunder. The children are still in the countryside, missing their parents. The gas masks are still in their boxes, carried everywhere, bumping against hips. The Christmas of 1939 is a sombre affair. There are empty chairs at the tables. We end this chapter not with a bang, but with a whisper. A soldier on the French border, shivering in his greatcoat, looks out into the grey mist of no man's land. He lights a cigarette, shielding the flame with his hand. He wonders if he will see another Christmas. He wonders if the world has gone mad. He does not know that he is standing on the precipice of the greatest cataclysm in human history. He does not know that the killing has barely begun. The year turns, 1940 arrives, and with it, the end of the waiting. The spring will bring fire. The spring will bring the collapse of nations. The spring will bring the war to the doorsteps of Paris and London. But for now, the snow falls on the quiet guns, and Europe sleeps with one eye open. The winter of 1939 finally breaks. The ice on the French canals cracks and melts. The soldiers in the Maginot Line unbutton their greatcoats. The sun returns to Europe. It is April 1940, and the world is holding its breath. For months the newspapers have called it the Boer War, the phony war. It has been a war of waiting, of rumours, of inactivity. But silence in war is not peace. Silence is simply the enemy reloading. In the first weeks of April, the silence ends. It does not break in France, but in the north. Denmark and Norway fall in a matter of days. The German war machine jumps the sea. It is a shock, a slap in the face to the Allies, but the French and British commanders remain confident. They look at their maps. They look at the Maginot Line, that immovable wall of concrete along the German border. They look at the Ardennes forest, a thick, hilly region of dense trees and winding roads. They mark the Ardennes as impassable to tanks. They believe the trees are their shield. They are wrong. While the Allies watch the north, the German panzers are idling in the forests of the Eifel, hidden under camouflage nets, thousands of engines rumbling like a subterranean earthquake. They are pointing directly at the impassable forest. On May 10th, 1940, the real war begins. And it begins with a sunrise that is more beautiful than anyone has the right to expect. It is the start of one of the loveliest summers of the century. The sky is a piercing, cloudless blue. The birds are singing. And then, the gliders come. Silent, motorless planes land on the roof of Fort Eben-Emael in Belgium. This is supposed to be the strongest fort in the world. It is neutralized in minutes by hollow charge explosives and flamethrowers. The door to the west is kicked open. For the soldiers of the French army and the British Expeditionary Force, the next 6 weeks are a blur of confusion and noise. They rush into Belgium to meet the enemy, thinking they are fighting 1914 all over again. They dig in. They wait for the infantry charges. But the Germans do not play by the old rules. While the Allies move north, The main German force drives through the impassable Ardennes. A line of tanks stretching back 100 miles snakes through the narrow forest roads. If the Allies bomb them now, the invasion stops. But the Allies do not see them. The trees hide the steel. When the tanks burst out of the forest at Sedan, on the French side, the psychological shock is absolute. The French defensive line shatters. This is not a battle, it is a race. The German panzers are not trying to kill every soldier, they are trying to outrun them. They are driving west toward the sea, cutting the Allied armies in half. For the civilians of France, Belgium and the Netherlands, life dissolves into chaos. This is the beginning of l'Exode, the Exodus. Panic is contagious. It moves faster than the radio broadcasts. It starts in the border villages. People see the smoke, they hear the guns, they pack what they can. What do you take when you have 10 minutes to leave your life behind? You take the silver, you take the photo albums, you take the cat, you tie a mattress to the roof of the Citroën to protect against shrapnel. You put the grandmother in the wheelbarrow, and you walk. 8 million people take to the roads. It is a river of misery flowing south. The roads become parking lots. Cars run out of gas and are pushed into ditches. Horses die of exhaustion and bloat in the sun. The heat is oppressive. Dust coats everything. A thick, white chalk dust that cakes the lips and stings the eyes. This human river is not safe. The Luftwaffe returns. The Stukas dive on the refugee columns. They are not bombing military targets. They are bombing chaos. They want to block the road so the Allied armies cannot move. Imagine being in that column. You're walking next to a woman carrying a canary in a cage. You hear the scream of the siren. You dive into the nettles in the roadside ditch. The earth shakes, dirt rains down. When you stand up, the woman with the canary is gone. There is only a crater. You do not stop to mourn. You keep walking. The fear of what is behind you is greater than the fear of what is in front. The smell of the Exodus is specific. It is the smell of overheating engines, of unwashed bodies, of crushed lavender in the fields, and the sweet, sickly scent of rotting livestock killed in the crossfire. Meanwhile, the British Expeditionary Force is retreating. They are falling back towards the coast. They are fighting rearguard actions. Desperate battles in small French towns to buy time. But the German pincers are closing. The destination is a town many have never heard of. Dunkirk. By late May, the British army is trapped. 400,000 men are squeezed into a shrinking perimeter around the port. The city of Dunkirk is burning. The oil refineries have been hit, sending massive plumes of black smoke into the sky, blotting out the sun. It looks like the gates of hell have opened on the French coast. On the beaches, the men wait. They form long, snaking lines that extend into the water. They stand up to their necks in the sea, waiting for boats that might not come. They are thirsty. The water mains are broken. They are exhausted. They have been marching and fighting for 3 weeks without sleep. The Stukas come again. There is no cover on a beach. When the planes dive, the men can only crouch in the sand. The sand turns into deadly shrapnel when the bombs hit. The noise is deafening. The roar of engines, the explosions, the screams of the wounded. But then the miracle happens. The horizon fills with shapes. Not just navy destroyers, but small boats, fishing trawlers, pleasure cruisers, lifeboats, the little ships. They have come from England, crossed the channel under fire to pick up the boys. It is a chaotic, messy salvation. Men scramble up nets. They are pulled onto deck, slippery with oil and blood. They leave everything behind, their guns, their trucks, their dignity. They just want to go home. Over 9 days, 338,000 men are rescued. It is a defeat, a catastrophe, but it is also a survival story of biblical proportions. As the last ships leave Dunkirk, the silence returns to the beaches. They are covered in the wreckage of an army. Helmets bob in the surf. Trucks sit half submerged in the tide. The bodies of those who didn't make it roll in the waves. But for France, the agony continues. The Germans turn south. They march on Paris. Paris in June 1940 is a ghost town. The government has fled. 2/3 of the population has left. The shutters are closed. The cafes are empty. On June 14th, the first German scout cars enter the city. They drive down the Champs-Élysées. There is no fighting. Paris has been declared an open city to save it from destruction. The silence of Paris is different from the silence of the phony war. This is the silence of shame, the silence of shock. A man stands on the sidewalk, tears streaming down his face, as the grey columns march under the Arc de Triomphe. The swastika is hoisted over the Eiffel Tower. The city of light has gone dark. France surrenders. The armistice is signed in the same railway carriage where Germany surrendered in 1918. It is Hitler's ultimate revenge. Now Europe is a fortress of the Reich. From the Arctic Circle in Norway to the Spanish border, the swastika flies. Only one island remains, Great Britain. Across the Channel, the British people look at the sea. They know what is coming. The army has returned with nothing but their lives. They have no tanks. They have very few heavy guns. They are digging trenches on the beaches of Sussex and Kent. They are taking down road signs so the invaders will get lost. They are sharpening pikes and filling glass bottles with gasoline. The summer is still beautiful. The gardens of Kent are in full bloom, but the sky is about to become a battlefield. The Luftwaffe is moving its airfields to the French coast. They are only 20 miles away. You can see the cliffs of France from the cliffs of Dover. The enemy is visible with the naked eye. The Battle of Britain is about to begin. It will not be fought on the ground. It will be fought at 20,000 feet by young men with an average age of 20. But before the planes clash, there is a moment of stillness, a pause between the collapse of the continent and the assault on the island. In the pubs of London, the talk is grim but defiant. There is a sense of us against the world. The Blitz spirit is not born yet. It is being forged in this moment of absolute isolation. In the German airfields in France, the pilots are drinking champagne. They believe the war is practically over. They believe England will sue for peace in weeks. They do not know that the island is preparing for a fight to the death. They do not know that the radar towers on the British coast are turning, scanning the horizon, invisible electronic eyes waiting for the pulse of the incoming wave. We leave 1940 in the heat of July. The Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is beginning. The world has changed faster in 6 weeks than in the previous 20 years. The map is redrawn. And for the ordinary people, the refugees returning to their occupied homes, the mothers in London sewing blackout curtains, the pilots strapping into their Spitfires, life has become a day-to-day negotiation with death. The old world is truly dead. The new world is a place of sirens, shelters, and the terrifying knowledge that the sky itself has become the enemy. The summer of 1940 refuses to end. The heat persists, baking the clay of the southeast of England. But the sky has changed. It is no longer a canvas for clouds and birds. It is a chalkboard for geometry. White lines crisscross the blue, twisting and knotting together. Contrails. From the ground in the gardens of Kent and Sussex, the war looks silent and almost graceful. Tiny silver specks dance around each other at 20,000 feet. It looks like a game. But if you were close enough, you would hear the screaming of engines pushed to the breaking point. You would smell the high-octane fuel and the burning rubber. You would see that the silver specks are machines designed to shred metal and flesh. This is the Battle of Britain. It is a duel. The German Luftwaffe against the Royal Air Force. The numbers are impossible. The Germans have thousands of aircraft. The British have hundreds. Every day, the radar operators watch the blips form over France. They look like swarms of bees. For the pilots, life is a frantic cycle of waiting and terror. They sit in deck chairs on the grass airfields, wearing their yellow life jackets, smoking cigarettes, waiting for the telephone to ring. When it rings, they have minutes to get airborne. They climb into the freezing thin air to meet the wave. They fight for 10 minutes, run out of ammunition, and dive back home. They land, refuel, rearm, and go back up. Some do it 5 times a day. They are so tired they fall asleep with forks in their hands in the mess hall. Their faces are grey with exhaustion. They are the only thing standing between Hitler and the invasion of England. But in late August, a stray German bomber, lost in the dark, drops its bombs on London by mistake. It is an error that changes the war. In retaliation, the British bomb Berlin. Hitler is furious. He orders the Luftwaffe to switch targets, stop hitting the airfields, destroy the city, destroy London. On September 7th, 1940, the nature of the war shifts again. It is a Saturday afternoon. The weather is perfect. The docks in the East End of London are busy. Then the hum begins. It is a deep, throbbing vibration that comes up through the soles of your feet before you hear it with your ears. 300 German bombers, escorted by 600 fighters, cross the coast. They are a river of metal flowing up the Thames. They do not aim for the military bases. They aim for the people. The first bombs hit the docks. The warehouses are full of timber, rubber, oil, and spices. They explode. The fire is not like a normal house fire. It is an elemental force. The Surrey commercial docks turn into a furnace. The heat is so intense that the paint blisters on ships moored on the other side of the river. The wooden paving blocks of the streets catch fire. The asphalt melts, flowing into the gutters like black lava. As night falls, the fires act as a beacon. The second wave of bombers doesn't need navigation instruments. They just fly toward the red glow that lights up the horizon for miles. For the people of London, this is Black Saturday. The illusion of safety is gone. The government has built shelters, the Anderson shelters in the backyards. They are made of corrugated steel, buried halfway in the ground. They are cold, damp, and smell of wet earth. When the bombs fall close, the ground shakes like jelly. You sit there, knees to your chest, counting the seconds between the whistle and the thud. If you hear the whistle end, you are alive. If you don't, you are already dead. But not everyone has a garden. In the East End, in the crowded tenements, there is nowhere to dig. So, the people break the rules. The government has said the underground stations are for transport, not for shelter. They are worried that if people go down, they will never come back up. They are worried about a deep shelter mentality. The people do not care. They buy a ticket for a penny and they go down. They refuse to leave. Imagine the scene at Liverpool Street or Piccadilly Circus. It is a subterranean city. Thousands of people cram onto the platforms. They sleep on the concrete, head to toe. There is no privacy. A grandmother in her nightgown sleeps next to a businessman in a suit. A young mother nurses her baby while the trains rattle past inches from her head. The air is thick. It smells of unwashed bodies, stale tobacco smoke, disinfectant and anxiety. The heat is stifling. There are no toilets, just buckets behind curtains. But down here, 70 feet below the street, you cannot hear the guns. You can feel the hits, a dull thump that shakes dust from the tiled ceiling. But you are safe. A strange culture emerges in the tube. Concerts are held. Libraries are set up on rolling carts. People play cards. They argue about politics. They share sandwiches. The class system of England, usually so rigid, dissolves in the tunnel. A lord and a labourer are equal when the ceiling might collapse on both of them. Above ground, the city is being reshaped. Every morning, the all-clear siren sounds. A long, steady note that is the sweetest sound in the world. The people emerge from the earth like troglodytes. They blink in the grey morning light. The air is filled with a fine grit. It tastes of pulverised brick and plaster. They walk home to see if their house is still there. Sometimes it is just a gap in the row, like a missing tooth. A staircase leading to nowhere. A bathtub hanging precariously from a second floor that no longer exists. You see strange things in the rubble. A pristine teacup sitting on a pile of bricks. A wedding dress blown out of a shop window, draping over a lamppost, untouched by the soot. The surreal becomes normal. Shop owners whose windows have been blown out sweep up the glass and put up signs. More open than usual. This is the Blitz spirit. History will paint it as a time of cheerful defiance, of cups of tea and thumbs-up signs. And it is that. But it is also a time of terror, looting, and exhaustion. People are tired, deeply, clinically tired. They're sleeping 4 hours a night. They're working 12-hour shifts in factories, making shells, and spending their nights putting out fires. They're running on adrenaline and strong tea. In November, the Germans target Coventry. They drop incendiary bombs first to strip the roofs off the buildings, then high explosives to blow the insides out. They destroy the medieval centre of the city. They destroy the cathedral. The destruction is so complete that the Germans invent a new verb, Coventrieren, to coventrate, to raze to the ground. But the bombing does not break the British. Instead, it hardens them. It creates a cold, dull anger. In 1939, they were fighting for Poland. Now, in late 1940, they're fighting for their own front doors. As winter sets in, the Blitz becomes a routine. The siren goes at 6 p.m. The bombers come, the guns fire, the sun comes up, you go to work. It is a grim rhythm, but the German strategy is failing. They are killing civilians, but they are not destroying the factories or the radar, and they are losing planes. The RAF is bleeding, but the Luftwaffe is bleeding faster. Hitler realizes he cannot invade. He cannot cross the channel while the RAF still flies. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, the German eye turns away from the west. Hitler postpones Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. He looks at the map again. He looks east, toward the vast wheat-filled steppes of the Soviet Union. He believes Britain is beaten, just not dead yet. He decides to strike his true enemy. But the war does not stop expanding. While London burns, the fire spreads to the desert. In North Africa, Italian forces attack the British in Egypt. It seems like a sideshow at first, a colonial skirmish. But the desert is a tactician's dream and a soldier's nightmare. There are no cities to hide in. There are no trees. There is only the sun, the sand, and the tank. The war in the desert is fought for water and oil. It is a clean war in a way. There are no civilians to kill in the deep Sahara. It is machine against machine. But the conditions are medieval. The inside of a tank reaches 120 degrees. You can fry an egg on the hull. The flies are a plague. They cover your food before you can lift it to your mouth. The sand gets into everything, into the engine filters, into the gun breeches, into your eyes, into your pores. As 1940 ends, the war is global. It is in the skies over London. It is in the waters of the Atlantic, where the U-boats are sinking tonnage faster than it can be built. It is in the sands of Libya. And in the snows of the Balkans, Mussolini invades Greece, dragging Hitler into a southern campaign he does not want. Christmas 1940 is darker than the last. The lights are out all over Europe. In the occupied countries, the resistance is beginning to stir. It is small at first. Graffiti on a wall, a cut telephone wire, a secret newspaper passed hand to hand. But the spirit of the continent is not dead. In the United States, President Roosevelt watches the fires of London. He knows America cannot stay out forever. He begins the Lend-Lease program. He becomes the arsenal of democracy. American ships begin to cross the ocean, loaded with steel and food. The giant is waking up. We leave 1940 in the rubble of the London Guildhall. It is burning on New Year's Eve. The smoke swirls around the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, which stands miraculously untouched, rising out of the inferno like a symbol of survival. The fire watchers on the roof of the cathedral look out over a city on fire. They are exhausted. They are dirty, but they are still standing. The phony war is a distant memory. The war of survival has begun. And the year 1941 is approaching like a freight train. It brings with it the two events that will decide the fate of the human race: the invasion of Russia and the attack on Pearl Harbor. The war is about to become a world war. The year 1941 arrives with the deceptive quiet of a predator stalking its prey. In the west, the bombing of London slows, the skies clear, but the centre of gravity is shifting. The German army is moving, not west toward the Channel, but east. Millions of men are boarding trains. Thousands of tanks are being loaded onto flatbeds. They're moving to the border of the Soviet Union. It is the greatest secret build-up in history, yet everyone can feel the vibration of it. The ground trembles from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south. Hitler has decided to roll the dice. He believes the Soviet Union is a rotten house. He says, "We have only to kick in the door, and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down." He believes the war will be over in 10 weeks. He does not issue winter coats to his soldiers. He does not order antifreeze for the trucks. He believes they will be parading in Red Square before the first snowflake falls. On Sunday, June 22nd, 1941, the longest day of the year, the sun rises on a new kind of war. This is Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German soldiers cross the border, 3,000 tanks, 7,000 artillery pieces. It is an invasion force of a size the human mind struggles to comprehend. It is a wall of fire stretching for 1,800 miles. For the Soviet soldier on the border, the morning is a confusion of noise and death. The telegraph lines are dead. The command bunkers are pulverized by dive bombers before the officers can even put on their boots. Stalin in the Kremlin is paralyzed by shock. He refuses to believe the reports. He thinks it is a provocation. He orders his men not to fire back. They are slaughtered where they stand. This is not the war of gentlemanly conduct. This is not the war of the desert. This is a war of annihilation. The orders given to the German soldiers are explicit. The rules of the Geneva Convention do not apply here. Political officers, commissars, are to be shot on sight. This is a war of race, of ideology, of extinction. The summer of 1941 on the Eastern Front is a season of dust and heat. The Russian steppe is vast. It is an ocean of grass and sunflowers. The dust kicked up by the marching columns is so thick it clogs the engines of the tanks. It coats the faces of the soldiers until they look like statues. They march 30 miles a day. They fight, they win, and they march again. But the horizon never gets closer. Russia is not just a country. It is a distance. It swallows armies. The German victories are staggering. They encircle Soviet armies in pockets the size of small European countries. In Kiev, they capture 600,000 prisoners in a single battle. The columns of Soviet prisoners walking west stretch from horizon to horizon. They are walking into a black hole. Most will never be seen again. They will die of starvation in barbed wire cages where they strip the bark off trees for food. But despite the victories, the German soldiers feel a creeping unease. They destroy a Russian division and another one appears from the steppe. They take a city, and the next one is 100 miles away. The maps are wrong. The roads are not roads. They are dirt tracks, and the resistance is fanatical. In the Brest fortress, Soviet soldiers fight for a month deep behind the German lines. They scratch messages into the brick walls. "I am dying, but I do not surrender. Farewell, motherland." And then the weather turns. In October, the rains come. In Europe, rain is an inconvenience. In Russia, rain is a weapon. The dirt roads turn into Rasputitsa, the season of mud. This is not mud as you know it. It is a glutinous, sticky soup that is 3 feet deep. The Blitzkrieg, built on speed, grinds to a halt. Trucks sink to their axles. Tanks slide off the roads. Horses, the backbone of the German supply lines, die of exhaustion trying to pull cannons through the mire. The German army, the most modern machine in the world, is reduced to the speed of a walking man. While the Germans are stuck in the mud, the Soviets are frantic. They are dismantling their factories in the west brick by brick. They load the machines onto trains and ship them east. behind the Ural Mountains, beyond the reach of German bombers. In the middle of the Siberian winter in the open air, women and children reassemble the factories. They plug in the lathes and start making tanks before the roofs are even built. It is a miracle of industrial survival. Then the mud freezes, the ground hardens, the tanks can move again. The Germans lunge for Moscow. They are so close. They can see the golden spires of the Kremlin through their binoculars. They are 10 miles away. But then comes the true ruler of Russia, General Winter. The temperature drops. Not to freezing, but to 40 degrees below zero. The German oil turns into tar. The recoil fluid in the artillery guns freezes, so the guns shatter when fired. The synthetic rubber tyres of the trucks crumble like biscuits. The German soldiers are still wearing their summer uniforms. They have denim tunics and hobnailed boots. The steel nails conduct the cold of the ground straight into their feet. Frostbite turns toes black. Men die while standing sentry, frozen solid in their greatcoats. To start a tank engine, they have to build a fire under the hull. And out of the white mist comes the counterattack. Stalin has called up the Siberian divisions. These are men born in the snow. They wear quilted jackets, felt boots, fur hats. They are on skis. They are accompanied by the T-34 tank, a machine designed for this weather, with wide tracks that float over the snow. On December 5th, the Germans stop. They can go no further. The Wehrmacht, which conquered Europe, is frozen in its tracks at the bus stops of Moscow. The myth of invincibility is broken. The war in the East will not be a sprint. It will be a meat grinder that will last for 4 years. But while the eyes of the world are fixed on the freezing hell of Moscow, the sun is rising on the other side of the world. It is Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941. Hawaii. The island of Oahu is a paradise. Palm trees, warm breezes, the smell of plumeria. In Pearl Harbor, the US Pacific Fleet is at anchor. It is a majestic sight. 8 battleships, the spine of American naval power. On the USS Arizona, the band is preparing for the morning colors ceremony. Sailors are writing letters home, looking forward to shore leave. It is a sleepy, lazy morning. The radar station at Opana Point picks up a signal, a massive cloud of blips. The operators call it in. The lieutenant on duty tells them not to worry. He thinks it is a flight of B-17s arriving from the mainland. Don't worry about it, he says. At 7:48 a.m., the first Japanese Zero breaks through the clouds. The sound is different from the Stuka. It is a high-pitched whine. The emblem on the wings is not a black cross, but a rising sun. The attack is a masterclass in surprise and coordination. Torpedo bombers drop their payloads into the shallow water. They have modified the fins so the torpedoes run shallow, specially designed for this harbour. They slam into the battleships. The USS Oklahoma rolls over. Hundreds of men are trapped inside the hull, in the dark, as the water rises. They tap on the steel with wrenches, hoping someone hears them. A bomb strikes the USS Arizona. It penetrates the deck and hits the forward magazine. 1 million pounds of gunpowder explode. The ship actually lifts out of the water. The sound of the explosion is heard miles away. The fireball consumes the air. In seconds, 1,177 men are dead. The Arizona settles into the mud, burning. The harbour is a sea of fire. Oil has leaked onto the water and caught flame. Sailors are swimming through burning oil. The air is thick with black smoke that blots out the tropical sun. It is chaos. Men are firing back with whatever they have. Machine guns, rifles, pistols. In Washington, it is early afternoon. President Roosevelt is eating lunch. The phone rings. It is the Navy Secretary. He says, "Mr. President, it looks like the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor." Roosevelt knows what this means. The isolation is over. The sleeping giant has been awakened. 4 days later, Hitler declares war on the United States. It is his greatest strategic blunder. Now Germany is fighting the British Empire, the Soviet Union, and the United States of America simultaneously. As 1941 ends, the map of the war encompasses the globe. The fires are burning in the Russian snow, in the Libyan desert, in the Atlantic Ocean, and in the jungles of the Pacific. There is no corner of the earth left untouched. Life in 1942 will be different. It will not be about shock anymore. It will be about endurance. It will be about total mobilization. It will be about the Holocaust moving from mass shootings to industrial factories of death. It will be about the turning of the tide. But for now, we stand in the smoke of Pearl Harbor and the snow of Moscow. The world is broken. The lines are drawn. And the long, hard road to victory, or death, stretches out into the unknown years ahead. The war has only just begun to show its true face. The year 1942 begins in the dark. If you are an Allied soldier, there is very little hope on the horizon. The German war machine is frozen but unbroken in Russia. The Japanese Empire is sweeping across the Pacific like a tsunami. They are moving faster than anyone thought possible. They are rewriting the map of Asia in weeks. In February, the Gibraltar of the East falls, Singapore. It was supposed to be the impregnable fortress of the British Empire, the guns pointed out to sea waiting for a naval attack. But the Japanese army comes from the jungle behind them, riding on bicycles. 80,000 British, Australian, and Indian troops surrender. It is the greatest humiliation in British military history. The illusion of European superiority is shattered forever. The white man is not invincible. He is being marched into captivity. In the Philippines, the Americans face their own nightmare. They are trapped on the Bataan Peninsula. They are starving. They are riddled with malaria and dysentery. They are eating monkeys, iguanas, and eventually nothing. When they surrender, the Japanese force them to walk 65 miles to the prison camps. This is the Bataan Death March. The heat is 95 degrees. The road is a river of white dust. If you stop to drink from a puddle, you are bayoneted. If you fall, you are beheaded. If you try to help a fallen comrade, you are shot. The Japanese soldiers, raised on the Bushido Code which views surrender as the ultimate disgrace, look at these prisoners with contempt. They are not men anymore. They are things. The Pacific War reveals its face early. It will be a war without mercy. It will be a war where prisoners are a burden. It will be a war of racial hatred on both sides. While the soldiers suffer in the jungle, a very different kind of horror is taking place in a quiet, snowy suburb of Berlin. On January 20th, 1942, 15 high-ranking Nazi officials meet in a villa on the shores of Lake Wannsee. It is a beautiful house. They are served cognac and smoked salmon. They are polite. They are educated men. Many have doctorates. They sit around a table for 90 minutes. They are not discussing military strategy. They are discussing logistics. They are solving what they call the final solution to the Jewish question. There is no screaming here, no guns. Just the rustling of paper and the clinking of silverware. Heydrich leads the meeting. They calculate how many trains are needed, how much gas, how to process the gold teeth and the hair. They turn genocide into an industrial process. By the time they finish their lunch, they have signed the death warrant for 11 million people. This is the terrifying heart of 1942. The camps in Poland, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, are opening. They are not concentration camps. They are death factories. You do not go there to work. You go there to die. The train arrives. You are stripped. You are gassed. You are burned. The chimney smoke hangs over the Polish countryside. A heavy, sweet, greasy fog that the locals try to ignore. But in the middle of this darkness, the pendulum of the war begins to swing. It happens in the middle of the ocean, at a place called Midway. June 1942. The Japanese Navy seeks to finish what they started at Pearl Harbor. They want to lure the American carriers out and destroy them. They have 4 heavy carriers. The Americans have 3, and one of them, the Yorktown, is held together with duct tape and plywood after being damaged in a previous battle. It is a battle fought over hundreds of miles of water. The ships never see each other. It is a game of blind man's bluff played with dive bombers. At 10:20 a.m. on June 4th, the Japanese seem poised to win. Their decks are full of planes armed and ready to take off. The American torpedo bombers have been slaughtered. But then the clouds part. 3 squadrons of American Dauntless dive bombers arrive at the exact same moment, by pure accident. They look down. Below them, the Japanese carriers are huge yellow decks painted with the red sun. They are floating gas stations covered in fuel lines and bombs. The Americans tip over into the dive. It takes 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to change the course of history. 3 Japanese carriers are turned into infernos. The Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu. They burn from stem to stern. A 4th is sunk later. The backbone of the Japanese Navy is snapped. They will never recover. The expansion stops. The contraction begins. But stopping the enemy is one thing. Pushing them back is another. In August, the Americans land on Guadalcanal. It is a small, rotting island in the Solomons. This is where the US Marines learn what war in the Pacific really means. It is not just the Japanese they are fighting. It is the jungle. Everything is wet. Your boots rot off your feet. Your skin grows fungus. The mosquitoes are clouds of misery. Scorpions hide in your boots. The mud smells of excrement and decay. The Marines are abandoned by their navy, which retreats after a disastrous sea battle. They are left alone on the island, with limited food and ammo. They hold a small perimeter around an airfield. Every night the Tokyo Express, Japanese destroyers, sails down the coast and shells them. Giant naval shells tear through the jungle, turning trees into splinters. The Marines huddle in their foxholes, shaking, the concussion waves making their noses bleed. Then come the Banzai charges. The Japanese soldiers attack in waves. Screaming, running directly into the machine guns, they choose death over failure. The next morning the bodies are piled in front of the wire like driftwood. The Marines look at the piles and realise they will not stop. We will have to kill them all. While the Marines rot in the jungle, the German army in Russia wakes up from the winter. Hitler has a new plan. He ignores Moscow. He looks south, to the Caucasus, to the oil fields. If he takes the oil, the Soviet war machine stops. But standing in his way, on the banks of the Volga River, is a city named after the Soviet dictator, Stalingrad. The German Sixth Army, the conquerors of France, marches toward the city. It is a massive force. The summer is hot and dusty again. They reach the Volga in August. On August 23rd, the Luftwaffe arrives. They do not just bomb Stalingrad. They erase it. They drop more tonnage than on London. The city, built of wood, turns into a bonfire. The oil tanks on the river explode, and the burning oil spills into the Volga. The river itself catches fire. The ferry boats trying to cross civilians to the East Bank burn in the water. 40,000 people die in the first week. The Germans think the battle is won. The city is a ruin. Surely no one can fight in this. They move in to occupy the rubble, but the rubble is better than a fortress. The Soviet 62nd Army, commanded by General Chukov, digs in. Chukov's order is simple. There is no land for us beyond the Volga. They will die in the city. This is the beginning of the Rattenkrieg, the Rat War. The tanks are useless here. They can't move through the piles of bricks. The war becomes personal. It is fought room by room. Kitchen by kitchen, sewer by sewer. A German soldier writes home, "We have fought for 15 days for a single house. The front is a corridor between burnt-out rooms. The street is no longer measured by meters, but by corpses." Snipers dominate the city. Vasily Zaitsev becomes a legend, hunting German officers from the shadows. The Russians hug the German lines. They stay so close, sometimes in the next room, that the German artillery cannot fire for fear of hitting their own men. The fighting is medieval. Men kill each other with sharpened shovels, with knives, with bricks. They fight in the basements, in the attics, in the factory halls. The grain elevator, a massive concrete silo, becomes a fortress. A handful of Russian sailors hold it for days against tanks and flamethrowers, burning alive inside rather than surrendering. As the autumn of 1942 turns to winter, the German army is slowly sucked into the city. They capture 90% of Stalingrad. They reach the river, but they cannot push the Russians into the water. The Russians hang on by their fingernails to a strip of land a few hundred yards wide. And while the Germans are obsessed with the city, looking only forward, they do not look at their flanks. On the snowy steppes outside the city, the Soviets are gathering. A massive secret army. Tanks painted white. 1 million men. They are preparing a trap. It is called Operation Uranus. On November 19th, the trap snaps shut. The Soviets attack the weak Romanian and Italian flanks north and south of the city. They smash through. 4 days later, the two Soviet pincers meet at Kalak. The German Sixth Army, 300,000 men, is surrounded. The hunter has become the trapped animal. Inside the kessel, the cauldron, the mood shifts from victory to terror. Winter has returned. The temperature drops to -30. The food runs out. The ammunition runs out. Hermann Göring promises to supply the army by air. It is a lie. The Luftwaffe can't do it. The soldiers in Stalingrad begin to starve. They eat the cavalry horses. Then they eat the dogs. Then they look at the frozen bodies of their comrades in the snow and they think the unthinkable. As Christmas 1942 approaches, the German soldiers in Stalingrad sit in their holes wrapped in rags. They sing Silent Night over the radio. Their voices are thin and weak. In Germany, the radio broadcasts imply they are holding the line, heroes of the Reich. It does not tell the mothers that their sons are freezing to death in a cellar in Russia, abandoned by their Führer. 1942 ends with the sound of the wind howling through the skeletons of buildings in Stalingrad. The turning point has passed. The Axis has been stopped at Midway, stopped at El Alamein in the desert, and trapped on the Volga. The myth of the master race is dying in the snow. The initiative has passed to the Allies. The year of defence is over. The year of the offence, 1943, is about to begin. And it will be a year of grinding, relentless crushing of the enemy, mile by bloody mile. The sun rises on 1943 over a landscape of frozen death. In Stalingrad, the end has come. The German Sixth Army, once the proud conquerors of Europe, is now a ghost army. They are skeletons in rags. They have no fuel, no food, and no hope. In the basement of the Univermag department store, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus sits in the dark. His face is twitching. Outside, the Soviet tanks are rumbling through the ruined streets. On January 31st, he surrenders. He is the first German field marshal in history to be taken alive. The surrender is not the end of the suffering. It is a new chapter of it. 91,000 German prisoners begin the march to Siberia. They walk through the snow, wrapped in stolen curtains and cement bags. They're walking into oblivion. Only 5,000 of them will ever see Germany again. When the news reaches Berlin, the Nazi regime does not tell the truth. They play tragic music on the radio. They speak of a heroic struggle. But the German people know. The letters have stopped coming. The silence from the East is deafening. The myth of the invincible Wehrmacht is buried in the rubble of Stalingrad. But 1943 is not just about the fall of armies, it is about the rise of machines. The Allies have fully mobilized their economies. Detroit is churning out a tank every few minutes. The Soviet factories behind the Urals are producing T-34s by the thousands. The war has become a mathematical equation, and the Axis is on the wrong side of the numbers. This shift is felt most violently in the cold grey waters of the North Atlantic. For 3 years, the German U-boats have been the wolves of the sea. They have hunted with impunity, sinking merchant ships faster than they can be built. But in May 1943, Black May, the hunters become the prey. Technology has caught up with them. The Allied ships now have radar that can see in the dark. They have sonar that can hear the heartbeat of a submarine. They have long-range Liberator bombers that can patrol the air gap in the middle of the ocean. Life inside a U-boat in 1943 is a claustrophobic nightmare. You're trapped in an iron coffin. You hear the ping of the sonar, ping, ping, ping. It is the sound of death approaching. When the depth charges drop, the hull screams. The lights blow out. Pipes burst, spraying freezing water and oil. You sit in the dark, breathing stale air, waiting for the pressure to crush you. In May alone, 41 U-boats are destroyed. The German crews call it the Iron Coffin. The crews are getting younger and younger. Boys of 18, sent out to sea knowing they have a 70% chance of dying. The Battle of the Atlantic is effectively won. The supply lines to Britain are open. The American giant can now ship its muscle to Europe. And what is that muscle doing? It is burning Germany to the ground. The air war changes in 1943. The British bomb by night, the Americans bomb by day. It is round-the-clock bombing. The targets are no longer just factories. The target is the city itself. In July, the RAF launches Operation Gomorrah against Hamburg. The name is biblical and fitting. They drop a mix of high explosives to blow the roofs off, and incendiaries to light the interiors. The weather is hot and dry. The fires link up. They suck the oxygen out of the air to feed the flames. This creates a firestorm, a hurricane of fire. Winds of 150 miles per hour scream through the narrow streets, pulling trees, cars and people into the inferno. The asphalt boils. People hiding in the bomb shelters are not burned. They are suffocated as the fire eats all the oxygen. 42,000 people die in a week. Hamburg is erased. When the survivors emerge, they walk through a moonscape of grey ash. The psychological shock to Germany is profound. They are reaping the whirlwind they sowed in Warsaw and London. While Hamburg burns, the greatest clash of armour in human history is taking place on the Russian steppe. Kursk. Hitler wants one last great victory in the east. He targets a bulge in the Soviet line around the city of Kursk. He delays the attack, waiting for his new superweapons, the Tiger and Panther tanks. These are monsters of steel, heavily armoured, with massive guns. But the delay is fatal. The Soviets know he is coming. They have spies. They turn the Kursk salient into the most fortified place on earth. They dig 3,000 miles of trenches. They lay 1 million mines. They pack the earth with anti-tank guns. On July 5th, the Germans attack. It is a collision of giants. Imagine a wheat field, golden under the summer sun. Now fill it with 3,000 tanks and 2 million men. The dust cloud is visible from space. The sound is so loud it causes bleeding from the ears. The German Tigers are powerful, killing T-34s from 2 kilometers away. But there are too many Russians. The T-34s charge in, closing the distance, ramming the German tanks. It is a brawl. Tanks are firing at point-blank range. Turrets are blown off. Crews bail out of burning machines and fight with pistols in the burning grass. The sky is black with aircraft. The ground is shaking. For a week, the metal grinders chew on each other. The Germans pierce the first line of defence, then the second. But there is always a third. At the Battle of Prokhorovka, the 2 tank armies collide head-on. By evening, the field is a graveyard of burning steel. The German advance stalls. Hitler, nervous about the Allied landing in Sicily, calls off the attack. It is the death knell of the German army. They have thrown their best units, their newest weapons, and their greatest effort at the Soviets, and they have failed. They will never launch a major offensive in the east again. From now on, they will only retreat. The red steamroller has started its engine, and it will not stop until Berlin. In the south, the Allies kick open the soft underbelly of Europe. They invade Sicily, then mainland Italy. Mussolini is overthrown by his own people. The Italians surrender. But the Germans rush in to occupy the country. Italy is not soft. It is a spine of mountains. The Germans turn every hill. every stone farmhouse, every river crossing into a fortress. The Allied advance is slow and bloody. It is a war of mud and mules. Soldiers fight uphill in the rain, against an enemy that knows the terrain. It is a slog that will last until the end of the war, but on the other side of the world, in the Pacific, the nature of the war is changing too. The Americans are no longer just holding the line, they are island hopping. The strategy is simple but brutal. Skip the heavily fortified Japanese islands, cut off their supply lines, let them starve, but capture the key islands to build airfields. In November 1943, the US Marines target a tiny atoll called Tarawa. It is a strip of sand and coral, barely nearly a square mile. The Japanese commander boasts that 1 million men could not take Tarawa in 100 years. He has built 500 bunkers made of concrete and coconut logs. The Marines have a new vehicle, the Amtrak, a floating tank, but there aren't enough of them. The attack begins at low tide. This is a catastrophic mistake. The landing craft hit the coral reef hundreds of yards from the beach. The Marines have to get out and wade. They're walking into a wall of machine gun fire. The water turns red. Men are cut down in waist-deep water, weighed down by their packs. There is no cover. It is a slaughter. Those who make it to the beach find a seawall made of coconut logs. They huddle behind it. The smell is horrific. Rotting coral, high explosives, and death in the tropical heat. But the Marines do not retreat. They move forward, inch by inch. They use flamethrowers to clear the bunkers. They throw grenades into the firing slits. It takes 3 days. At the end of 3 days, almost all of the 4,600 Japanese defenders are dead. Only 17 surrender. The Marines suffer 3,000 casualties. The American public is shocked. They see the newsreels. They see the bodies floating in the tide. They see the cost of the war. Tarawa becomes a word that means sacrifice. But it also proves that the Japanese defensive ring can be broken. As 1943 comes to a close, the ring is tightening. The U-boats are defeated. Italy is invaded. The German cities are burning. The Soviet army is marching west. And the American Navy is driving across the Central Pacific. The leaders of the Big Three, Roosevelt, Churchill and Stalin, meet in Tehran in November. They plan the final blow. Stalin demands a second front. He wants the Allies to invade France. Roosevelt and Churchill agree. They set a date for the spring of 1944. They call it Operation Overlord. We leave 1943 in the mud of Italy and the snow of Ukraine. The Axis is broken but not beaten. They are like a wounded animal, dangerous, desperate and cornered. The road to victory is visible now, but it is paved with obstacles that will require a river of blood to cross. The fortress Europe waits across the Channel. The Atlantic Wall is bristling with guns. 1944 is coming. The year of liberation. The year of the longest day. The spring of 1944 in southern England does not feel like spring. It feels like a cage. The entire bottom half of the island is sealed off. You cannot travel. You cannot make a phone call without someone listening. The woods, the fields, the lanes, they are choked with machinery. 3 million men are waiting. They are American, British, Canadian, French, Polish. They are sleeping in tents, playing craps on the hoods of jeeps, waterproofing their tanks and writing letters they hope will not be their last. The tension is a physical weight. Everyone knows it is coming. The Germans know it is coming. The only questions are when and where. Across the Channel, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stands on a dune in Normandy. He looks at the grey, churning sea. He knows the Allies have air superiority. He knows he cannot move his panzers in daylight. His only chance is to stop them on the water, to stop them at the high tide mark. He plants millions of mines. He installs Rommel's asparagus, wooden poles to impale gliders. He builds concrete bunkers that look like sleeping beasts. He tells his aide, the first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive. For the Allies, as well as Germany, it will be the longest day. On June 5th, the weather is terrible. A storm is raging. The Channel is a washing machine of grey waves. In the Supreme Headquarters, General Eisenhower has to make a choice. If he waits, the moon phase passes and they have to wait a month. If he goes, he risks the storm. He looks at the rain lashing against the window. He looks at his meteorologists. There is a small window of calm predicted for the morning of the 6th. He says, "Okay, let's go." That night, the sky over Normandy is filled with the drone of engines. 24,000 paratroopers drop into the dark. They are blown off course. They land in flooded fields. They land in trees. They land in town squares full of Germans. It is a chaotic, confused fight in the dark, fought with knives and crickets, small clickers used to identify friends. But the real hammer blow comes at dawn. If you're a German soldier looking out from a bunker at Omaha Beach at 6 a.m. on June 6th, you see something that your mind refuses to accept. The horizon is gone. It is replaced by ships. 5,000 ships. It is the greatest armada the world has ever seen. The naval bombardment begins, and the earth shakes so hard that teeth rattle in skulls. Then, the landing craft head for the shore. Inside the Higgins boats, the smell is vomit and diesel. The men are seasick. They are soaked. They are carrying 80 pounds of gear. They are terrified. The ramp drops. At Utah, Gold, Juneau and Sword beaches, the landings go relatively well, but at Omaha, it is a slaughterhouse. The geography is a trap. A crescent beach surrounded by cliffs. The aerial bombardment has missed the bunkers. The German defences are intact. As the ramps drop, the MG-42 machine guns open up. They fire 1,200 rounds a minute. It sounds like ripping canvas. Men are cut in half before they leave the boat. Those who jump into the water are pulled under by their heavy packs. The water turns red, not pink, red, thick, arterial red. There is no cover. The sand is flat. The only protection is the steel hedgehogs the Germans planted to stop tanks. Men huddle behind them, shivering, listening to the bullets ping off the metal. The first wave is decimated. Officers are dead. Radios are broken. The invasion is stalled. But then, something happens. It isn't a grand strategy. It is raw human courage. A sergeant stands up and yells, "There are two kinds of people staying on this beach, those who are dead and those who are going to die. Now let's get the hell out of here." Small groups of men, leaderless, wet and angry, start to move. They crawl, they blow the wire, they climb the bluffs. By noon, the Atlantic wall is breached. The crust is broken. But the Battle of Normandy is not over. It changes from a beach fight to a hedge fight. The bocage. The countryside is a maze of ancient hedgerows. These are banks of earth 6 feet high, topped with thick, tangled bushes. They are perfect fortresses. A single German tank can hold up an entire American battalion. The fighting is claustrophobic. You can't see the enemy until you are 5 feet away. It is a slow, grinding war of attrition. For weeks, the Allies measure progress in yards. While the Western Allies fight in the hedges, a different kind of storm breaks in the east. On June 22nd, exactly 3 years after the German invasion, the Soviet Union launches Operation Bagration. If Normandy is a hammer blow, Bagration is an earthquake. The Soviets launched 2.3 million men against Army Group Center. The German line, stretched thin, simply evaporates. The Soviets don't just push the Germans back, they encircle and annihilate them. In a few weeks, 28 German divisions are wiped off the map. It is the biggest defeat in German military history, worse than Stalingrad. The road to Berlin is now wide open. Back in the west, the Americans finally break out of the hedgerows. The German front in France collapses. The retreat begins. It is a rout. On August 25th, the Allies enter Paris. The scenes in Paris are pure ecstasy. The 4 years of darkness are over. Women in summer dresses climb onto the tanks to kiss the soldiers. Champagne bottles are uncorked. The bells of Notre Dame ring out. But even amidst the joy, there is danger. German snipers are still on the rooftops. Shots ring out during the parade. The crowd scatters, then reforms. The need to celebrate is stronger than the fear of death. But the war is not just in Europe. In the Pacific, the Americans are closing the ring. In June 1944, they invade Saipan. This is crucial territory. From Saipan, the new B-29 super fortress bombers can reach Tokyo. The Japanese know this. They fight with suicidal intensity. The Battle of Saipan ends with a tragedy that scars the soul of every American who sees it. The Japanese civilians on the island have been told by their government that the Americans are monsters who will torture and eat them. As the Marines advance, thousands of civilians, mothers with babies, old men, school children, retreat to the northern cliffs. The Marines use loudspeakers. They plead with them, "Do not jump. We will give you food. We will not hurt you." But the propaganda is too strong. Entire families hold hands and leap from the cliffs onto the jagged rocks hundreds of feet below. The water at the base of the cliff turns crimson. The Marines watch in horror, helpless. It is a stark warning. If this is how the Japanese fight for an island, how will they fight for their homeland? As the autumn of 1944 arrives, a dangerous optimism settles over the Allied commanders in Europe. The Germans are running. The Allies are racing toward the German border. Everyone says, the war will be over by Christmas. But supply lines are stretched. The tanks are running out of gas, and the Germans are fighting on their own soil now. The resistance stiffens. The Allied advance stalls at the Siegfried Line. General Montgomery tries a gamble. Operation Market Garden. He tries to drop paratroopers into the Netherlands to capture the bridges over the Rhine. It is a bridge too far. The operation fails. The British 1st Airborne Division is destroyed at Arnhem. The hope of a quick end to the war dies in the autumn mist. Winter comes, and with it, the ghosts of the past. Hitler, trembling in his bunker, surviving on drug cocktails and rage, looks at the map. He sees a weakness. The Ardennes forest, the same place he attacked in 1940. The Americans are holding this sector with tired troops and green recruits who have never seen combat. They think it is a ghost front, quiet, safe. Hitler scrapes together the last reserves of the Reich, the last panzers, the last boys. He launches a massive surprise attack. December 16th, 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. The Americans wake up to the sound of artillery. Out of the heavy fog, the Tiger tanks emerge. The American lines crumble. It is chaos. Units are cut off. Men are running in the snow, dropping their rifles. The weather is Hitler's ally. The fog grounds the Allied Air Force. The Germans push deep into Belgium, creating a huge bulge in the line. The 101st Airborne Division is rushed to the town of Bastogne. They are surrounded. They are cut off. They have no winter clothes. They are running out of ammo. It is 20 degrees below zero. The Germans send a message demanding surrender. The American commander, General McAuliffe, sends back a one-word reply. Nuts. The siege of Bastogne becomes legend. The paratroopers huddle in their foxholes wrapped in blankets, fighting off wave after wave of German attacks. They are freezing. Trench foot is rampant, but they hold. Then, on December 23rd, the sky clears. The sun comes out. The soldiers look up and cheer. The P-47 Thunderbolts and Typhoons drop from the sky. They smash the German supply columns. They bomb the panzers. The German fuel runs out. The tanks stop. The last gamble of the Third Reich has failed. We end 1944 in the snows of the Ardennes. The ground is littered with the frozen bodies of American boys and German boys. The victory is certain now, but the cost has been astronomical. The year of liberation has bled the world dry. But the final act remains. The Allies are on the border of Germany. The Russians are on the banks of the Oder River, 40 miles from Berlin. The beast is in its lair. 1945 is coming. It will be the year of the bunker, the year of the firebombing, the year the camps are opened and the world sees the face of evil, the year of the mushroom cloud. The end is near, but the dying is far from over. The year 1945 does not begin with the sunrise. It begins with a death rattle. The Third Reich is dying, but it is dying like a rabid animal. biting, thrashing, and dangerous to the very end. In the west, the Americans and British are pushing toward the Rhine River. It is the last natural barrier protecting the heart of Germany. The German soldiers defending it are a mix of exhausted veterans and terrified children. The Volkssturm, the People's Storm, has been called up. Old men in WWI uniforms and boys as young as 12 are given anti-tank rockets and told to die for the Führer. In March, at a town called Remagen, a miracle happens. The Germans try to blow the Ludendorff Bridge to stop the Americans. The charges explode. The bridge jumps in the air, but it slams back down, intact. The Americans race across. The Rhine is breached. When the Allied soldiers enter Germany, they expect to find monsters. Instead, they find a moonscape. The cities, Cologne, Frankfurt, Hamburg, are hollow shells. The people living in the cellars are ghosts. They are covered in dust, starving and silent. They hang white sheets from every window. The arrogance of 1940 is gone. There is only fear, but as the Allies push deeper, they discover that the ruins hide a secret far worse than just military defeat. In April, American troops approach a town called Ohrdruf, a sub-camp of Buchenwald, then Dachau, then Bergen-Belsen. The first thing that hits them is not the sight. It is the smell. It is a smell that has no comparison in human experience. It is a thick, sweet, cloying stench of rotting flesh and dysentery that clings to the uniforms and coats the back of the throat. The soldiers, battle-hardened men who have seen their friends blown apart on the beaches of Normandy, break down and weep. They find rail cars filled with bodies. They find walking skeletons. Human beings so emaciated that their skin is translucent, their eyes bulging from their skulls. General Eisenhower visits Ohrdruf. He walks through the sheds of the dead. His face is a mask of fury. He orders every American soldier in the area to tour the camp. He orders the German civilians from the nearby town to be marched through it. He says, "We are told that the American soldier does not know what he is fighting for. Now, at least, he knows what he is fighting against." The Holocaust is no longer a rumour. It is a physical reality. The newsreels are sent home. The world stares into the abyss and sees the industrialization of murder. While the West discovers the camps, the East is experiencing the apocalypse. The Red Army is in Germany. They are not looking for liberation. They are looking for revenge. For 4 years, their country has been raped and burned. Now the bill has come due. The Soviet advance is a tidal wave of violence. Millions of German civilians flee west, trying to reach the American lines. They trek through the snow, pulling sleds piled with their belongings. If they stop, they freeze. If they are caught by the Soviet tanks, they are crushed. In the Baltic Sea, the greatest maritime disaster in history takes place. The cruise ship Wilhelm Gustloff is filled with 10,000 refugees, mostly women and children trying to escape. A Soviet submarine fires 3 torpedoes. The ship sinks in icy water. 9,000 people drown. It is 6 times the death toll of the Titanic, yet in the chaos of 1945 it is barely a footnote. By mid-April, the Red Army is at the gates of Berlin. The Battle of Berlin is the final circle of hell. The city is already a ruin from the air raids. Now it becomes a slaughterhouse. 2.5 million Soviet soldiers surround the city. Inside, the defence is led by the SS fanatics and the Hitler Youth. The fighting is fought in the sewers, in the subway tunnels, in the zoo. The Flak Tower at the Berlin Zoo, a massive concrete fortress, fires its anti-aircraft guns horizontally at the Russian tanks. The noise is deafening. The smoke is so thick that day turns into night. In the centre of the city, under the Reich Chancellery, lies the Führer bunker. It is a surreal, claustrophobic concrete world. While the city above burns, Hitler moves imaginary armies on a map. His hands shake uncontrollably. He rants about betrayal. He orders the flooding of the subway tunnels to stop the Russians, drowning thousands of his own civilians hiding there. On April 30th, with the Russians only a few blocks away, Adolf Hitler bites into a cyanide capsule and shoots himself in the head. The 1,000-year Reich ends in a damp, petrol-soaked ditch in the garden where his body is burned. On May 2nd, Berlin falls. On May 8th, Germany surrenders. The war in Europe is over. The lights come back on in London and Paris. Crowds dance in Times Square. But the celebration is shadowed by the knowledge that the killing is not done. Half a world away, the Pacific is still burning. The Americans have reached the doorstep of Japan. But the closer they get, the harder the fighting becomes. In February they land on Iwo Jima. It is a volcanic island covered in black ash and sulphur. The Japanese are not on the island, they are in it. They have dug 18 miles of tunnels. The Marines have to burn them out cave by cave. It takes 36 days to capture an island the size of a municipal airport. 7,000 Marines die. 21,000 Japanese die. Then comes Okinawa, April 1945. This is the final stepping stone. The Japanese unleash a new horror, the kamikaze. Divine wind. Thousands of young pilots are given planes loaded with explosives and enough fuel for a one-way trip. They are human missiles. They dive into the American fleet. The radar screens are full of bogies. The anti-aircraft guns fire until the barrels melt. But you can't stop them all. Ships explode. The USS Bunker Hill turns into an inferno. The psychological toll on the sailors is immense. They are fighting an enemy that wants to die. On the island of Okinawa, the rain turns the battlefield into a slurry of mud and maggots. It is the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. The civilians are caught in the crossfire. 100,000 civilians die. The Americans look at the carnage of Iwo Jima and Okinawa and do the math. They are planning the invasion of mainland Japan, Operation Downfall. They estimate 1 million American casualties. They estimate 10 million Japanese dead. The Japanese government is training schoolgirls to fight with sharpened bamboo spears. They have adopted the slogan, "The shattering of the jewel." They are prepared to commit national suicide. But deep in the deserts of New Mexico, a new power has been born. On July 16th, the gadget is tested, the Trinity test. The flash is brighter than 1,000 suns. The sand turns to green glass. J. Robert Oppenheimer watches the mushroom cloud rise and thinks of the Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." President Truman is faced with the hardest decision in history: invade and lose 1 million men, or use the bomb. He issues an ultimatum: surrender or face prompt and utter destruction. The Japanese silence is interpreted as rejection. August 6, 1945. A lone B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, flies over the city of Hiroshima. It is a Monday morning. People are going to work. Children are clearing fire breaks in the streets. At 8:15 a.m., the bomb, Little Boy, drops. 43 seconds later, the world changes forever. There is a blinding flash of blue-white light. The heat is so intense that birds ignite in mid-air. The patterns of kimonos are burned into human skin. Shadows are burned onto stone walls. The shadow of a person sitting on steps. The shadow of a valve wheel. Then comes the blast wave. It flattens the city. 70,000 people are vaporized in an instant. Tens of thousands more will die of radiation poisoning, a strange new sickness where hair falls out and gums bleed. The Japanese government is in shock. They cannot comprehend a single bomb destroying a city. They debate. They stall. 3 days later, August 9th, a second bomb, Fat Man, falls on Nagasaki. Another city is erased. Finally, the emperor intervenes. On August 15th, his voice is heard on the radio for the first time in history. He speaks in archaic, courtly Japanese. He says the war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. He asks his people to bear the unbearable. Japan surrenders. On September 2nd, 1945, in Tokyo Bay, the battleship USS Missouri sits at anchor. General Douglas MacArthur stands on the deck. The Japanese delegation, wearing formal morning coats and top hats, signs the instrument of surrender. The ink dries. The guns fall silent. It has been 6 years and 1 day since the German tanks crossed into Poland. The cost is incalculable. 60 million people are dead. The majority are civilians. The great cities of Europe and Asia are piles of brick. The map of the world has been torn up and taped back together. The British Empire is bankrupt and dying. The French Empire is cracking. 2 new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, stand atop the ashes, staring at each other with suspicion. The Cold War is already beginning in the silence of the hot war's end. But for the soldier standing on the deck of the Missouri, or sitting on a crate in Berlin, or walking home to a village in Russia, the geopolitics don't matter. What matters is the quiet. After the scream of the Stuka, the roar of the Panzer, the wail of the siren, and the crack of the rifle, there is just silence. A soldier takes off his helmet. He lights a cigarette. He looks at the sky, a sky that is finally mercifully empty of machines. He takes a deep breath. He is alive. The world is broken. The ghosts of the dead crowd the air. The innocence of humanity is gone, burned in the ovens and vaporized in the atomic flash. But the storm has passed. The killing stops. The rebuilding begins, and the long shadow of the greatest tragedy in human history stretches out behind us, a warning written in blood for all the generations to come. This was the Second World War, and this is where our story ends. The guns are silent, the treaties are signed, the parades in New York and London are over. The confetti has been swept away. But in Europe and Asia, the reality of peace is setting in, and it is a reality that is almost as terrifying as the war itself. Germany calls it Stunde Null, hour zero. It implies a fresh start, a blank slate. But the slate is not blank, it is covered in ash. If you're living in Berlin or Warsaw or Tokyo in 1946, you're living in a moonscape. There are no street signs, there are no roofs. The landmarks you grew up with are piles of pulverized brick. The smell of the war, that sickly sweet scent of decay buried under the rubble, does not go away. It lingers for years. Survival in 1946 is not about dodging bullets, it is about calories. The economy has collapsed, money is worthless. A wheelbarrow of Reichsmarks cannot buy a loaf of bread. The new currency is the American cigarette. Lucky strikes. Camels, Chesterfields, these are the gold standard of the new Europe. You can buy anything for a carton of cigarettes. You can buy a camera. You can buy a family heirloom silver set. You can buy dignity. You can buy a body. The streets are filled with the Trümmerfrauen, the rubble women. The men are dead or in prisoner camps, so the women of Germany are rebuilding the country with their bare hands. They form long human chains, passing bricks one by one. They chip off the old mortar, stack the bricks, and start again. It is a task of Sisyphus. Berlin alone has 75 million cubic meters of rubble. It will take 20 years to clear it. But the physical ruin is nothing compared to the human ruin. Europe is awash with displaced persons, DPs. 14 million people are on the roads. They are walking. Former slave labourers trying to get back to France. Holocaust survivors trying to find a way to Palestine. Germans expelled from Poland and Czechoslovakia, carrying their lives in bundles on their backs. They gather in DP camps. Ironically, many of these camps are the former concentration camps, cleaned up and repurposed. The survivors are still behind wire, still waiting, still stateless. They post notes on message boards. Looking for Chaim. Looking for Maria. Last seen in Auschwitz. Last seen in Lodz. The walls are covered in thousands of names. Most will never be answered, and then comes the hunger. The winter of 1946-1947 is one of the coldest in history. The coal distribution has broken down. People freeze to death in their apartments. In Britain, which won the war, Bread is rationed for the first time, something that never even happened during the Blitz. In Germany, the average ration is 1,000 calories a day. It is a starvation diet. People eat tulip bulbs. They eat nettle soup. They hunt stray dogs. This is the savage continent. Law and order are fragile. Banditry is rampant. In the rural areas, gangs of orphans roam the woods like wolf packs stealing food to survive. Revenge is common. In France, women accused of sleeping with German soldiers are dragged into the streets, their heads shaved, swastikas painted on their foreheads. It is an ugly, visceral purging of shame. In Nuremberg, the victors try to bring order to the chaos. They set up a courtroom in one of the few standing buildings. They put the surviving Nazi leaders in the dock: Göring, Hess, Ribbentrop. To the people starving in the ruins, the trial feels distant, almost surreal. They hear the list of crimes. Crimes against peace. Crimes against humanity. They see the films of the camps played in the courtroom. The Nazi leaders look small, stripped of their uniforms and their power. They are just old, angry men making excuses. I was following orders. I didn't know. When the hangings happen, there is no national mourning. There is just a numbness. The German people are too busy trying to find coal for the stove to care about the death of Hermann Göring. In Japan, the occupation is different. General MacArthur arrives not as a conqueror, but as a new shogun. He makes a controversial decision. The emperor will stay. He will not be tried. He will not be hanged. He will be stripped of his divinity. But he will remain the symbol of the nation. It is a pragmatic gamble to prevent chaos, and it works. Japan does not dissolve into insurgency. Instead, it begins a quiet, disciplined reconstruction. The Japanese people, shamed by defeat, channel their energy into rebuilding. They starve, they work, and they endure. In the United States, the soldiers come home. The magic carpet operation brings millions of men back across the ocean. They get off the ships in New York and San Francisco. They kiss the ground. They kiss their wives. They try to fit back into the suits they left behind in 1941. But the suits feel tight. The men have changed. They have the 1,000-yard stare. They jump when a car backfires. They have nightmares they never talk about. They go to work in offices and factories, trying to pretend that they didn't see the world burn. This is the generation that will build the suburbs. They will build the highways. They will have children, the baby boomers. They are desperate for normal. They want a lawn, a fence, a fridge, and quiet. They want to forget the mud of Bastogne and the sands of Iwo Jima. But the world they built is divided. The alliance between the West and the Soviet Union, born of necessity, cracks instantly. Stalin refuses to leave Eastern Europe. He draws a line from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic. Winston Churchill, now out of power, travels to Fulton, Missouri. He gives a speech. He says, "An iron curtain has descended across the continent. The Cold War begins before the ashes of the Hot War are even cold. The atomic bomb, the weapon that ended the war, now hangs over the peace like a sword of Damocles. The fear of invasion is replaced by the fear of annihilation. And yet, life goes on." In the spring of 1947, the flowers bloom in the craters of London. In the fields of France, the farmers plough around the rusted hulks of tanks. In the schoolyards of Berlin, children play tag in the shadows of the ruins. Humanity is resilient. It is a weed that grows through the cracks of the concrete. We have walked through 6 years of hell. We have seen the worst of what humans can do to each other. We have seen the industrialization of death. But we have also seen the best. We have seen the courage of the resistance, the sacrifice of the beaches, the endurance of the civilians. The story of World War II is not just a story of battles, it is a story of survival. It is the story of how the human race looked into the abyss, tottered on the edge of extinction, and somehow pulled itself back. The scars remain. You can still see them today if you look. The shrapnel marks on a building in London, the bunkers on the Normandy coast, the silence of Auschwitz. but the grass has grown over the graves. This is the legacy of the greatest generation. Not that they conquered the world, but that they saved it. And in doing so, they gave us the most precious, fragile gift of all, the chance to try again. The peace is 3 years old, but in Berlin, it feels like the war never truly ended. It just changed shape. The city is no longer a battlefield of soldiers, but a battlefield of ideologies. Berlin is an island. It is a ruined city occupied by the Western Allies, Americans, British, French, but it is floating deep inside the Soviet zone of occupation. It is a jagged piece of the West stuck in the throat of the East. Stalin wants the West out. He wants Berlin. He believes that if he squeezes the city hard enough, the Americans will leave. He does not use tanks. He uses hunger. On June 24th, 1948, the lights go out. The Soviets cut the electricity to West Berlin. Then they cut the land routes. The Autobahn is closed. The railways are stopped. The canals are blocked. 2.5 million people are trapped. They have food for 36 days. They have coal for 45. The siege of Berlin has begun. Imagine living in West Berlin in the summer of 1948. You're already living in a ruin. You're malnourished. And now you're told that the world outside has been cut off. Panic sets in instantly. People hoard potatoes. They strip the trees in the Tiergarten Park for firewood. The black market explodes. A loaf of bread becomes more valuable than a grand piano. The American military governor, Lucius Clay, looks at the map. He knows there is no way to push a convoy through on the ground without starting World War III. If American tanks ram the Soviet roadblocks, the Red Army will pour into West Germany. The atomic bombs will fall. Civilization will end. But there is a loophole. The skies. There are 3 air corridors, invisible highways in the sky 20 miles wide, guaranteed by treaty. The Soviets cannot block the air without shooting down planes. So the impossible order is given: supply an entire city of 2.5 million people entirely by air. This is Operation Vittles, the Berlin airlift. It begins chaotically. The Americans have a few C-47s, old, weary transport planes from the war. They can carry 3 tons each. Berlin needs 4,000 tons a day just to survive. It seems like a mathematical impossibility. The Soviets mock the effort. The Soviet press writes, the futile attempts of the Americans to save their face will collapse in weeks. But the machine begins to grow. The Americans bring in the C-54 Skymasters. The British join in. Pilots who were dropping bombs on Berlin 3 years ago are now flying day and night to save it. Life in Berlin becomes dictated by the drone of engines. It is a sound that never stops. A plane lands every 3 minutes, day and night, rain or shine. For the pilots, it is a grueling marathon. They fly from Frankfurt to Berlin, unload, and fly back. They do not leave the cockpit. They eat sandwiches while flying. They sleep in shifts on the tarmac. The weather is terrible. Fog, rain, low clouds. The approach to Tempelhof Airport is a nightmare. It is right in the middle of the city. To land, you have to fly between apartment blocks. You have to drop steeply over a graveyard, hit the runway, brake hard, and taxi off. If you miss the approach, you cannot circle back because the airspace is too crowded. You have to fly all the way back to West Germany with your cargo. Accidents happen. Planes crash into the streets. Pilots die in balls of fire. But the operation does not stop. On the ground, the survival of the Berliners depends on the dried potato. Fresh food is too heavy, so everything is dehydrated. Powdered eggs, powdered milk, dehydrated potatoes. The food tastes like chalk. It sits heavy in the stomach. But it keeps you alive. The winter of 1948 approaches. This is the true test. You can survive without butter, but you cannot survive without coal. Berlin freezes. The airlift shifts gears. Now they are flying in coal. Coal dust is everywhere. It gets into the plane's instruments. It coats the pilot's lungs. It covers the faces of the German workers unloading the sacks. In the unheated apartments of Berlin, families huddle in one room. They burn furniture, they burn books, they wear all their clothes at once. They listen to the radio, Rias radio in the American sector. The radio tells them the tonnage for the day. Today, 5,000 tons. It becomes a scorecard of survival. And amidst the grey misery, a flash of humanity appears. Gail Halvorson, an American pilot, is standing by the fence at Tempelhof. He sees a group of German children watching the planes. They are not begging. They are silent. He talks to them. He realizes they haven't had chocolate or gum in years. He reaches into his pocket and gives them 2 sticks of gum. The children break the gum into tiny pieces to share. Those who don't get a piece sniff the wrapper. Halvorson is moved. He tells them, "Watch my plane tomorrow. I will wiggle my wings. I will drop something for you." The next day he flies over. He wiggles the wings of his C-54. He pushes small parachutes made of handkerchiefs out of the flare chute. Attached to them are chocolate bars. The candy bomber is born. It captures the imagination of the world. Soon, American schoolchildren are donating chocolate. Old ladies are sewing parachutes. It is a propaganda coup, yes, but it is also a moment of pure connection. The children of Berlin, who learn to fear the sound of engines, now run into the streets cheering when they hear the planes. By the spring of 1949, the airlift has become a well-oiled machine. They are landing a plane every 45 seconds. They are bringing in more supplies by air than were previously brought in by rail. The Soviets realize they have lost. The blockade is not starving Berlin. It is turning Berlin into a symbol of Western defiance. It is uniting the West. NATO is formed in April 1949, a direct result of the blockade. On May 12, 1949, the Russians give up. The barriers go up. The first trucks roll in from West Germany. They are covered in flowers. The people of Berlin line the streets weeping. They are skinny, pale, and exhausted, but they are free. The airlift officially ends later that year. It has cost over $224 million. It has cost the lives of 39 British and 31 American airmen. But it has saved a city. And it has done something else. It has transformed the enemy. 3 years ago, the Germans were the monsters. They were the Huns. Now they are the victims. They are the allies. The American pilot and the German mechanic have shaken hands on the tarmac of Tempelhof. The psychological scars of the war have begun to heal, replaced by the shared trauma of the Cold War. We leave 1949 with a world permanently divided. Germany is split in two. Berlin is split in two. The Iron Curtain has hardened into concrete, but the peace is fragile. While the engines cool down in Berlin, they are revving up on the other side of the world. In China, the communists under Mao Zedong are seizing power. The Red Scare is sweeping America. And on a peninsula in Asia that most Americans couldn't find on a map, Korea, trouble is brewing. The World War is over. The Cold War has begun. And the next chapter of survival will not be fought in the cities of Europe, but in the frozen mountains of Asia, where the temperature drops to 30 below, and the enemy comes in human waves under the light of flares. 1950 is coming, and it brings with it the forgotten war. The world is barely 5 years out of the global fire. The soldiers have settled into their suburban lives. They have put on weight. They have forgotten the sound of incoming artillery. They think the war is history. But on a rainy Sunday morning, June 25, 1950, history repeats itself. On the Korean peninsula, the 38th parallel is the arbitrary line dividing the communist north from the pro-Western south. At 4:00 a.m. the artillery opens up. It is a blitzkrieg Asian style. The North Korean People's Army, KPA, pours across the border. They have Soviet T-34 tanks. The South Koreans have nothing to stop them. The American advisors are stunned. Seoul falls in 3 days. The retreat is a rout. The American soldiers rushed in from occupation duty in Japan are soft. They are young kids who signed up for the GI Bill and the travel. They are not the hardened veterans of Normandy. They are thrown into battle with old bazookas that bounce off the T-34s. They are overrun. By August, the Americans and South Koreans are pinned into a tiny corner of the peninsula, the Pusan perimeter. It is a stand or die moment. If they break here, they are pushed into the sea. But then, the old lion roars. General Douglas MacArthur, 70 years old, smokes his corncob pipe and plans a masterstroke. September 15th, 1950, Incheon. It is an amphibious landing behind enemy lines. It is risky. The tides at Incheon are notorious. 30-foot swings. If the ships get stuck in the mud, it's a massacre. But MacArthur pulls it off. The Marines storm the seawalls. They cut the North Korean supply lines. The enemy army disintegrates. Suddenly the Americans are winning. They push north. They cross the 38th parallel. They capture Pyongyang. They are drunk on victory. MacArthur promises the boys they will be home by Christmas. They push all the way to the Yalu River, the border of China. The geography here is hostile. It is not rice paddies anymore. It is jagged mountains, deep gorges, and narrow winding roads. It is wild country. And winter is coming. The temperature drops. It keeps dropping. By November, it is 25 degrees below zero. The American Marines of the 1st Division are strung out along a narrow mountain road near a man-made lake called the Chosin Reservoir. They call it the Frozen Chosin. They feel uneasy. The mountains are too quiet. The locals have vanished. On the night of November 27th, the silence breaks. Not with guns, but with bugles, and whistles, and shepherds' horns. It is a terrifying, dissonant sound echoing off the canyon walls. And then the mountains seem to move. The Chinese have entered the war. Mao Zedong has secretly moved 120,000 soldiers into the mountains. They travel by night, hiding under camouflage capes by day. They wear white quilted uniforms. They have no trucks, no heavy artillery. They carry everything on their backs: rice, grenades, and ammunition. They wear canvas shoes with rubber soles. They attack in human waves. They swarm the American positions. For the Marines at Chosin, the world dissolves into chaos. They are surrounded, outnumbered 10-1. The battle becomes a fight against two enemies, the Chinese and the cold. The cold is a physical monster. It freezes the lubrication in the guns, so the men have to urinate on them to get them to fire. It freezes the plasma in the medical kits. It freezes the morphine syrettes, so the medics have to keep them in their mouths to warm them up before injecting the wounded. If you sweat, the sweat freezes inside your clothes and you die of hypothermia. If you touch bare metal, your skin rips off. Digging a foxhole is impossible. The ground is like iron. You sleep on the frozen earth, huddled with your buddies, taking turns staying awake so you don't freeze to death in your sleep. The Chinese soldiers are suffering even worse. Many of them have no gloves. Their feet turn black with frostbite. They charge on stumps. When they are shot, they don't bleed. The blood freezes instantly. General Oliver P. Smith, commanding the Marines, realizes the trap. He's ordered to retreat, but he refuses to call it a retreat. He issues one of the most famous quotes in military history. "Retreat hell, we're just attacking in another direction." The breakout from Chosin is a 70-mile fighting withdrawal to the sea. It is a slow, agonizing procession of trucks, jeeps, and walking wounded. They are moving down a single-lane icy road with Chinese snipers on the ridges above. Every mile is a battle. The Marines have to clear the high ground to let the column pass. They climb the icy cliffs under fire. At a place called Funchlin Pass, the Chinese blow up the only bridge over a 1,000-foot gorge. The column is trapped. If they can't cross, they will be annihilated. The solution is a feat of engineering and desperation. The Air Force drops massive bridge sections by parachute. The engineers brave enemy fire to assemble the bridge in mid-air, suspended over the abyss. The column crosses. The men are zombies. Their faces are bearded, black with soot and covered in ice. They're eating frozen beans chipped out of cans with bayonets. but they are bringing their dead with them. They lash the bodies of their fallen comrades to the fenders of the trucks. No Marine left behind. When they finally reach the port of Hungnam, it is a scene of biblical evacuation. The Navy is there, the fleet of the damned. They load 100,000 troops and almost 100,000 North Korean refugees who are fleeing the communists. As the last ship leaves, the engineers blow up the port. A mushroom cloud of explosions rips through the docks. The Americans are gone. They have survived the trap, but they have lost the North. The war settles into a stalemate. It becomes a WWI-style conflict of trenches and bunkers along the 38th parallel. It drags on for 2 more years. The Korean War is strange. It is the first jet war. In the skies, American F-86 Sabres dogfight with Soviet MiG-15s. It is high-tech speed above and primitive slaughter below. It is also a war of desolation. The American bombers flatten North Korea. Every city, every town, every dam is targeted. The destruction is total. In 1953, an armistice is finally signed. Not a peace treaty, just a ceasefire. The line is drawn almost exactly where it was in 1950. 3 million people are dead. The peninsula is a ruin, and nothing has changed. The soldiers come home to a country that doesn't really care. There are no ticker-tape parades. The Korean War is confusing. It wasn't a victory. It was a police action. It is uncomfortable, so America forgets it. But for the men who walked out of Chosin, the cold never leaves their bones. They are the chosen few. They carry the memory of the bugles in the night, the frozen canvas shoes of the dead Chinese soldiers, and the white hell of the mountains. We leave 1953 with an uneasy silence. The Cold War has turned hot and then frozen again. The world realizes that this new conflict will not be resolved with a single decisive battle. It will be a long twilight struggle, and while the guns go quiet in Korea, the French are dying in a jungle valley in Indochina called Dien Bien Phu. The focus is shifting south, to a place of heat, rain, and green darkness. Vietnam is waiting. The year is 1954. The Korean War has frozen into a ceasefire, but the heat is rising in Southeast Asia. In a remote valley in northwestern Vietnam, close to the Laotian border, the French Empire is dying. The place is called Dien Bien Phu. To the French High Command in Paris, this valley is a trap. But they believe it is a trap for the enemy. They have dropped 16,000 of their best troops, paratroopers, foreign legionnaires, North Africans, into the valley floor. They have built an airfield. They have dug fortifications. They have named the strongpoints after their mistresses, Anne-Marie, Beatrice, Claudine, Eliane. Their plan is arrogant and simple. Lure the elusive Viet Minh guerrillas out of the jungle. Force them into a conventional battle. Use superior French artillery and air power to crush them. They believe the Vietnamese are a peasant army, incapable of moving heavy guns through the steep, jungle-covered mountains surrounding the valley. They are fatally wrong. While the French officers drink wine and play cards in their dugouts, General Von Nguyen Giap is performing a miracle of logistics. He has mobilized an army of human ants, tens of thousands of coolies, men and women. They are paving roads through the impenetrable jungle by hand. They are pushing heavy Soviet artillery pieces up 60-degree slopes, inch by inch, using ropes and pure muscle. They camouflage the guns with leaves so perfectly that French reconnaissance planes see nothing but green canopy. On March 13th, 1954, the trap snaps shut, but it catches the wrong animal. The shelling begins. It is not the sporadic mortar fire the French expected. It is a barrage of heavy 150mm howitzers. The shells rain down from the invisible heights. The French artillery commander, Colonel Piroth, who had boasted that his guns would silence the enemy instantly, realizes he cannot even see where the fire is coming from. Overcome by shame and hopelessness, he pulls the pin on a grenade and commits suicide in his bunker. The airstrip is destroyed, the lifeline is cut. Dien Bien Phu is no longer a base, it is a cage. Then, the rains come. The monsoon season turns the valley into a swamp. The trenches fill with water, the bunkers flood. The battlefield becomes a sea of liquid brown mud that sucks the boots off your feet. Life inside the siege becomes a WWI nightmare transplanted to the tropics. The smell is horrific. It is the smell of unburied bodies rotting in the heat, mixed with cordite, excrement, and the damp mould of the jungle. For the French soldiers, survival is a game of inches. You live in the mud, you sleep in the mud, you fight in the mud. The Viet Minh dig trenches that creep closer every night. They are like a noose tightening around the neck of the French garrison. The only supplies come by parachute. But as the anti-aircraft fire gets heavier, the transport planes have to fly higher. The drops miss the target. The French soldiers watch in agony as pallets of ammunition, food and wine drift into the enemy lines. The Viet Minh feast on French rations while the legionnaires starve. The hospital bunkers are scenes from Dante's Inferno. There are no antibiotics left. There is no anesthesia. Surgeons operate by candlelight, standing in ankle-deep bloody water. The wounded cannot be evacuated. Thousands of men lie on stretchers, stacked like cordwood, waiting to die. But in this horror, a strange medical phenomenon occurs. The maggots. The flies lay eggs in the wounds of the soldiers. The maggots eat the dead tissue, keeping the gangrene at bay. It is disgusting, but it saves lives. By late April, the perimeter is the size of a baseball field. The strong points fall one by one. Beatrice falls. Gabriel falls. The foreign legionnaires, men who have fought in deserts and mountains, fight with the desperation of the damned. They launch counterattacks with bayonets and flamethrowers, reclaiming a few yards of mud before being pushed back by the sheer weight of numbers. In Paris and Washington, the politicians panic. The Americans discuss Operation Vulture, using massive airstrikes, perhaps even tactical nuclear weapons to save the French. President Eisenhower looks at the map. He looks at the jungle. He decides against it. The French are on their own. May 7th, 1954. The end. The noise stops. The Viet Minh overrun the command bunker. The French commander, General de Castries, orders his men to destroy their radios and weapons. He puts on his best uniform. He waits. A red flag with a gold star rises over the command bunker. 10,000 French prisoners are marched out of the valley. They begin a 500-mile death march to prison camps. Only half of them will survive to see France again. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu is the death knell of colonialism. A European power has been defeated by an Asian guerrilla army. It sends a shockwave through the world. It inspires rebels in Algeria, in Africa, in South America. But for the United States, it is not an end. It is a beginning. At the Geneva Conference, Vietnam is split in half. The North belongs to the Communists. The South belongs to the West. The domino theory becomes the Bible of American foreign policy. If Vietnam falls, the rest of Asia will fall. So as the French ships sail away, American planes land. They do not bring combat troops, not yet. They bring advisors. They bring money. They bring the CIA. They prop up a new government in Saigon. They step into the muddy footprints the French have just left behind. They look at Dien Bien Phu and say, "We will not make the same mistakes. We have helicopters. We have napalm. We have the sheer might of the American industrial machine. We cannot lose to peasants in pajamas." They do not hear the silence of the jungle. They do not smell the rot. They do not understand that this is not a war for territory. It is a war for time, and the enemy has all the time in the world. We leave 1954 with a changing of the guard. The French tricolour comes down. The stars and stripes go up. The stage is set for a tragedy that will consume a generation. The 1950s roll on. The cars get bigger, the fins get larger. Elvis is on the radio. The suburbs are booming. But under the surface, the Cold War is freezing over. In Budapest, tanks crush a revolution. In Cuba, bearded rebels come down from the mountains, and in the Kremlin, Nikita Khrushchev bangs his shoe on the podium and tells the West, "We will bury you." The world is holding its breath. The doomsday clock is ticking toward midnight. The 1960s arrive with a smile. It is a time of technicolor optimism. In America, the cars have tail fins that look like rockets. The kitchens are pastel blue. The televisions are playing sitcoms where fathers know best and mothers bake pies in pearls. But beneath the chrome and the plastic, there is a low-frequency hum of terror. In the schools, the children are not just learning arithmetic. They are learning how to die. They practice duck and cover. When the teacher shouts drop, 30 children dive under their wooden desks, hands clasped over their necks. They are told that the desk will save them from the flash that melts glass. It is a lie, but it is a necessary lie to keep the panic at bay. In 1961, the Cold War turns into concrete. In Berlin, the Soviets build a wall overnight. It cuts the city in half like a scar. Families are separated. People jumping from windows to escape to the west are shot in mid-air. The Iron Curtain is no longer a metaphor. It is 12 feet high and topped with razor wire. But the true test comes a year later, closer to home, 90 miles from Florida. October 14th, 1962. A U-2 spy plane flies high over the jungles of Cuba. It takes pictures. When the analysts in Washington look at the grain, they stop breathing. They see geometry in the jungle, soccer fields, tents, and long tubular shapes on trailers, nuclear missiles. They are capable of hitting Washington, D.C. in 20 minutes. The warning time has gone from hours to 0. For the next 13 days, the world stops turning. President Kennedy goes on television on October 22nd. He looks tired. He speaks of a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment. He uses the word quarantine because a blockade is an act of war. But everyone knows what it means. The US Navy is surrounding Cuba. The Soviet ships are steaming toward them. It is a game of chicken played with thermonuclear weapons. Shutterstock explore. Life on the streets of America changes instantly. The grocery stores are stripped bare. People buy canned goods, water, batteries. There is no rioting. There is just a quiet, desperate preparation. Churches stay open 24 hours a day. People go in at 3 a.m. to pray. They look at their sleeping children and wonder if they will grow up. In Florida, the beaches are closed. The horizon is filled with invasion fleets. Anti-aircraft missiles are set up on golf courses. The army is mobilizing for the invasion of Cuba. They expect heavy casualties. They do not know that the Soviets in Cuba already have tactical nuclear weapons on the beach, and the authority to use them. If the Americans land, the beach will turn to glass. But the real drama is happening beneath the waves of the Sargasso Sea. October 27th, Black Saturday, the darkest day in history. A Soviet submarine, the B-59, is being hunted by the US Navy. The Americans are dropping practice depth charges. They are small explosives, meant to signal the sub to surface. But inside the B-59, they sound like the hammer of God. Life inside the sub is a living hell. The air conditioning has failed. The temperature is over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The sailors are fainting from heat stroke. The CO2 levels are dangerously high. Men are gasping for air, their brains fogged by lack of oxygen. They have been underwater for days. They have no radio contact with Moscow. They do not know if the war has already started. When the depth charges hit, the submarine rocks violently. The lights flicker and die. The emergency lights cast a sickly red glow over the sweating, terrified faces of the crew. The captain, Valentin Savitsky, snaps. He believes the war is on. He believes Russia is already burning. He screams, "We're going to blast them now. We will die, but we will sink them all." He orders the special weapon to be armed, a nuclear torpedo, 10 kilotons. Enough to vaporize the entire American carrier group above them. The firing key requires 3 officers to turn it. The captain turns his, the political officer turns his, Only one man hesitates, Vasily Arkhipov. He is the flotilla commander. He is calm despite the heat. He looks at the sweating, screaming captain. He says, "No." An argument breaks out in the red darkness. The fate of the human species hangs on this conversation. If Arkhipov turns his key, the torpedo fires. The Americans will retaliate with everything they have. The Soviets will fire back. The Northern Hemisphere will cease to exist. Arkhipov refuses. He convinces the captain to surface. The B-59 breaks the surface. The American destroyers are waiting. They do not fire. The fresh air rushes into the submarine. The world is still there. The sky is not burning. Vasily Arkhipov has just saved the world, and almost no one knows his name. Back in Washington and Moscow, the leaders blink. Khrushchev sends a letter. He agrees to remove the missiles if the US pledges not to invade Cuba. Secretly, the US agrees to remove its own missiles from Turkey. The ships turn around. The tension breaks. The world exhales. It is a collective sigh of relief that can be felt from London to Tokyo. The supermarkets restock. The children go back to school. The duck and cover drills continue, but the immediate terror fades. But something has changed. The innocence of the post-war boom is gone. We have looked into the abyss, and we saw that it was just a button push away. A direct telephone line, the hotline, is installed between the White House and the Kremlin. Never again can a misunderstanding lead to the end of the world. But the proxy wars do not stop. They just move. In a small divided country in Southeast Asia, a Buddhist monk sits down in a busy Saigon intersection. He pours gasoline over his robes. He strikes a match. The photo of the burning monk hits the front pages of the world. It is shocking. It is visceral. It is 1963. President Kennedy is assassinated in Dallas. The optimism dies with him. The new president, Lyndon Johnson, looks at the map of Vietnam. He sees the dominoes falling. He remembers the lesson of Wei Tun. Appeasement does not work. You have to stand up to aggression. But he is looking at the wrong war. He's thinking about tanks and front lines. He's not thinking about jungles, tunnels, and a people who have been fighting foreign invaders for 1,000 years. In August 1964, reports come in of an attack on US ships in the Gulf of Tonkin. The reports are confused, radar ghosts, sonar glitches, but it is enough. Congress passes the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. It is a blank check. The Marines are coming back, not to the beaches of France or the islands of the Pacific, but to the rice paddies of Da Nang. The helicopters are warming up. The rock and roll era is about to meet the reality of war. The 1960s are about to catch fire, the mid-1960s. The United States arrives in Vietnam not with a whimper, but with a roar. It is a technicolor arrival. The beaches of Da Nang are filled with Marines in clean uniforms. The sky is thick with F-4 Phantoms. The ocean is crowded with aircraft carriers. The American military machine, undefeated in 2 world wars, has come to crush a peasant insurgency. The generals in the Pentagon call it a war of attrition. They have giant computers. They crunch the numbers. They calculate the kill ratio. If we kill them faster than they can be replaced, we win. It is a war fought on spreadsheets. But on the ground, the spreadsheet dissolves into red mud. Life for the American infantryman, the grunt, is a sensory assault. The first thing that hits you is the heat. It is a wet, suffocating blanket. 100 degrees, 90% humidity. You're carrying 80 pounds of gear. Flak jacket, M16 ammo, grenades, water, sea rations. You sweat until you stop sweating, and then you drop from heat stroke. The jungle is not just trees, it is a biological weapon. Elephant grass cuts your skin like razor blades. Wait a minute vines hook your gear. Leeches drop from the canopy and latch onto your neck. Red ants bite. Mosquitoes carry malaria. Foot rot eats your skin away inside your boots. And then there is the silence. You walk for hours. Search and destroy. You are looking for an enemy who does not want to be found. The Viet Congs, these VC, are ghosts. They do not fight for territory, they fight for time. They decide when the battle starts and they decide when it ends. You're walking down a trail. The man in front of you trips a wire, a click. A bouncing Betty mine jumps into the air to waist height. It explodes. The patrol stops. The screaming begins. The medevac is called. This is the sound of Vietnam. The thump, thump, thump of the Bell UH-1 Iroquois. The Huey. It is the angel of mercy and the angel of death. It brings the mail, the beer, the ammo. It takes away the wounded in plastic ponchos. It is the taxi of the war. But it is also the symbol of the futility. You fly into a landing zone, LZ. You fight. You capture a hill. You lose 10 men, and then you fly away. The next day, the enemy walks back up the hill. You have conquered nothing but coordinates on a map. The enemy fights with prehistoric ingenuity. Punji stakes, sharpened bamboo dipped in human feces, pierce the boot and cause gangrene. Tripwires strung with grenades in sea ration cans. Sniper fire from spider holes. Camouflage tunnels that allow a man to pop up, shoot, and vanish into the earth. The Americans respond with biblical fire. Napalm, jellied gasoline. The F-4s drop the silver canisters. They tumble end over end. When they hit, the jungle turns into a liquid orange inferno. It sucks the oxygen out of the air. It burns at 2,000 degrees. Agent Orange. Planes spray the jungle with herbicides to strip the leaves so the enemy can't hide. The trees die. The crops die. The soldiers breathe the mist. They don't know it yet, but the chemical is rewriting their DNA, planting time bombs of cancer for decades to come. Back home, the war is invading the living room. This is the first television war. Every night at 6 p.m, Americans sit down to dinner and watch their sons dying in colour. They see the body bags. They see the burning huts. They see the Zippo raids. Marines setting fire to thatched roofs with lighters. The disconnect is total. The general on TV says, "There is light at the end of the tunnel." The reporter on the ground shows a pile of dead bodies. Then comes 1968, the year the world breaks. It begins with a holiday, Tet, the Vietnamese Lunar New Year. There is supposed to be a truce. The soldiers relax. The fireworks are ready. January 31st, 1968. In the middle of the night, the fireworks turn into mortar rounds. The North Vietnamese Army, NVA, and the Viet Cong launch a massive coordinated surprise attack on over 100 cities and towns simultaneously. They attack the air bases. They attack the provincial capitals. In Saigon, a suicide squad of Viet Cong sappers blows a hole in the wall of the US Embassy. They storm the compound. The symbol of American power is under siege. MPs fight a gun battle in the embassy garden. The dead bodies of VC soldiers lie on the manicured American lawn. The news cameras are there. The images are beamed home. The American public is stunned. They were told the enemy was defeated. They were told the war was almost over. Now, the enemy is in the embassy. The fighting is brutal. In Hue City, the ancient imperial capital, the NVA takes the citadel. They raise their flag. The Marines have to take it back block by block. This is not jungle warfare. This is Stalingrad. House to house, room to room. The Marines fight through the rubble of ancient temples. The monsoon rain falls constantly. The bodies pile up in the streets. Civilians are caught in the crossfire. The NVA executes thousands of enemies of the state, teachers, priests, government workers, and buries them in mass graves. The Americans retake Hue. They win the battle. The Tet offensive is a military disaster for the North. The Viet Cong are decimated. They lose 40,000 men. They fail to spark a general uprising, but they win the war, because they broke the American will. Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, goes to Vietnam. He walks through the rubble. He comes back and says on national television, "It seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate." President Lyndon Johnson watches. He says, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America." The draft becomes a death lottery. Young men burn their draft cards on university steps. They chant, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" The country is tearing itself apart. The World War II generation, the fathers cannot understand their sons. They call them cowards. The sons call the fathers murderers. The dinner table becomes a war zone. April 4th, 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated in Memphis. The cities explode. Riots in 100 cities. Smoke hangs over Washington, D.C. Army jeeps with machine guns patrol the streets of the capital. June 5th, 1968. Robert Kennedy is assassinated in Los Angeles. The hope for a peaceful end dies on a kitchen floor. The Democratic Convention in Chicago turns into a police riot. The police beat demonstrators with batons on live TV. The tear gas drifts into the convention hall. The whole world is watching. In Vietnam, the morale collapses. The soldiers know the war is lost. They just want to survive their 365 days, their tour, and go home. Drug use skyrockets, heroin, marijuana. Fragging incidents, soldiers rolling grenades into the tents of unpopular officers, increase. The racial tension from home travels to the jungle. Black power flags fly on patrol boats. Confederate flags fly on tanks. The army is at war with itself. We leave 1968 in a haze of smoke. The Tet Offensive has burned out, but the fire has spread to the soul of America. The illusion of American invincibility, born in 1945, has died in the rice paddies. A new president is coming, Richard Nixon. He promises peace with honor. He promises a secret plan. But the secret is bombing, more bombing, secret bombing. The war is about to spill over the borders into Cambodia and Laos. The killing fields are waiting. The nightmare is not over. It is just widening. The 1970s begin with a slow, agonizing withdrawal. The American strategy has shifted. It is now called Vietnamization. The plan is to hand the guns to the South Vietnamese army, wish them luck, and go home. President Nixon calls it peace with honor. The soldiers on the ground call it cutting and running. By 1972, the American combat troops are mostly gone. The bases are empty. The jungle reclaims the fire bases, but the air war continues. The B-52s are still pounding the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It is a curtain of fire designed to keep the North at bay just long enough for the Americans to leave without looking like they lost. In January 1973, the Paris Peace Accords are signed. The American POWs come home. They walk off the planes in their pristine uniforms, blinking in the television lights. The nation cheers. For America, the war is over. But for Vietnam, the ink on the treaty is worthless. The war doesn't stop. It just pauses to reload. Fast forward to spring 1975. The North Vietnamese Army, NVA, launches the final offensive. They expect a hard fight. Instead, they find a house of cards. Without American air support, the South Vietnamese army collapses. It is not a retreat. It is a stampede. The convoy of tears flows down the highways. Soldiers throwing away their uniforms, civilians carrying their ancestors' bones in jars, trucks running out of gas. The NVA rolls south. They capture cities in days that the Americans spent years defending. Hue falls. Da Nang falls. By late April, they are at the gates of Saigon. Inside the city, the mood is pure, distilled panic. The radio plays White Christmas, the code signal for the final American evacuation. Operation Frequent Wind. It is the largest helicopter evacuation in history. The skies over Saigon swarm with Hueys and Chinooks. They are landing on rooftops, in parking lots, and famously, on the roof of the CIA building. The scene at the US Embassy is a nightmare. Thousands of desperate Vietnamese civilians are pressing against the gates. They're waving papers. "I worked for you. I helped you. Please!" The Marines on the wall have to use rifle butts to smash the fingers of people trying to climb over the wire. It is a moral collapse. The Americans are choosing who lives and who dies based on how many seats are left in a helicopter. On the flight decks of the US Navy ships offshore, there is no room. The helicopters land, unload the refugees, and are then pushed into the sea to make room for the next one. Millions of dollars of machinery tumbling into the South China Sea. April 30th, 1975. The last helicopter lifts off. The embassy roof is empty. The North Vietnamese tanks, Russian T-54s, smash through the gates of the presidential palace. The soldier on the turret waves the Viet Cong flag. Saigon is renamed Ho Chi Minh City. The war is over. The silence that follows is the silence of the re-education camps. Hundreds of thousands of South Vietnamese officials and officers are marched into the jungle. They will spend years learning to think correctly, or dying of malnutrition. Those who can't live under the new regime take to the sea, the boat people. They drift in rickety fishing boats, facing typhoons and pirates, hoping to reach Malaysia, or the Philippines, or anywhere free. Many vanish beneath the waves, their stories lost forever. But while Vietnam suffers the pain of conquest, next door, in Cambodia, a horror is unfolding that defies human comprehension. This is the Khmer Rouge. During the war, the US secretly bombed Cambodia to disrupt the NVA supply lines. The destabilization helped a radical communist group rise to power. Their leader is a man named Pol Pot. He is a former schoolteacher with a gentle smile and a vision of hell. He wants to reset time. He calls it Year Zero, April 17th, 1975. The Khmer Rouge fighters enter the capital, Phnom Penh. They are mostly teenagers. They wear black pajamas and red-checkered scarves. They are unsmiling. They order the evacuation of the entire city. 2 million people. They tell the population the Americans are going to bomb. Leave your homes for 3 days. You won't need anything. It is a lie. They empty the hospitals. Patients are pushed out into the streets in their beds. Women in labour are forced to walk. The entire population is marched into the countryside. Pol Pot's vision is a pure agrarian utopia. No cities, no money, no family, no modern technology. Everyone will be a farmer. The entire country becomes a slave labour camp. The killing fields begin. The enemy of the state is anyone who is tainted by the modern world. If you speak a foreign language, you are an enemy. If you have soft hands, you are an enemy. If you wear glasses, you are an enemy. Because glasses imply you read, and reading implies independent thought. They are taken to the fields at night. To save bullets, they are killed with pickaxes, shovel handles, and sharpened palm leaves. Loudspeakers play revolutionary music to drown out the screams. Children are encouraged to spy on their parents. Angkar, the organisation, is your mother and father now. In the Tuol Sleng prison, S21, a former high school, 17,000 people are tortured and executed. They take photos of every prisoner. You can see the terror in their eyes. Only 7 people survive S21. 7. For 4 years, the world is largely silent. Cambodia is a black hole. No news comes out. Inside, a quarter of the population, 2 million people, die of starvation, execution, and disease. It finally ends in 1979, not because of Western intervention, but because Vietnam invades. The Vietnamese army walks into a land of ghosts. They find the piles of skulls. They find the mass graves. We leave the 1970s in a state of shock. The optimism of the space age is dead. The moral clarity of WFU is gone. The world has seen that ideology, unchecked, can turn a country into a slaughterhouse. The Cold War has left a trail of wreckage from the jungles of Vietnam to the killing fields of Cambodia. The US military is broken, demoralized, and gun-shy. The Soviet Union looks powerful, expanding its influence into Africa and Afghanistan. But the wheel of history is turning again. A new era is dawning, an era of proxy wars in the desert, of Star Wars in the sky, and the slow internal rotting of the Soviet Empire. The 1980s are coming, and the final showdown of the Cold War will not be fought with armies, but with economics, technology, and the courage of ordinary people behind the Iron Curtain.